Okay, right, we're live. That's the Charlotte music. What did I hear about Lord of the Rings? Oh, Orlando Bloom is going to be on Rings of Power. He's going to play his grandfather. Yeah, yeah. We'll switch over in like 10 seconds. You can do a countdown. Eight. Okay, I have the chat open too. If anyone chats with us, I'll see their comments. All right, let's do this. Going into the intro.
Tea Earl Grey hot.
Okay, welcome to the Picard maneuver.
You're Tim,
I'm Tim,
and I'm Joel.
and we're here for a spoiler in-depth breakdown review of Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode 9, Episode Vox.
Episode Vox. That's correct. That's the name of it. Correct.
Yep, which is a plot point. It's Latin for voice.
Yes, and I also have a guitar amp, and the Beatles used guitar amps made by Vox. So, little musician info for your ears,
Which is related to voices.
which is. So, but I didn't know actually that my amp's name Vox in Latin means voice. So now I actually learned from Star Trek about my musics. So thank you, Star Treks, about it. How's everyone doing? Is anyone watching yet?
Yao says hi.
Hello, how are you? So, what we want to do often, we just quickly do a reaction right away. Like, what was your reaction? Did you dance? Did you sing? Did you throw your Star Trek hat at the wall? What'd you do, Tim? How'd you feel?
Well, this was quite the episode. It was very exciting. I did, I was soured a little bit by the start, but I feel like the last half made it all worth it. I think I'm a little
Okay.
annoyed that my super appreciation, my joy over what I felt at the last half was a little sullied by what I felt. Let's to step back.
No, but you can say it.
Well, I was going to say that we had,
The season in general.
yeah, I struggled with with much of the season and the structure of the nature of the season, and we'll talk quite a lot about that. But we did a great job anticipating what was going to happen. I think most of our ideas, our theories, we figured out Jack was the weapon very early on, and most of our sort of problems, they set the season set up so that we basically spent the last several weeks, most of the last 8 weeks, thinking about all of the problems with the reveal that they were about to give. So as they revealed it, I sort of knew all that, was already thinking about all the problems of it, and I didn't like that. I feel like I would have enjoyed this season. First of all, if it was structured differently, but second of all, I think I would have enjoyed this season if I wasn't doing this. If I just watched it as a binge all at once, like 3 or 4 episodes at once or something like that, over a weekend or whatever. Like if and I
Okay.
didn't have time to think about what was going to happen next. I feel like that
So
would be a more
you've
enjoyable
ruined
way.
us doing this podcast has ruined your enjoyment of the season, Picard.
A little bit. Like it wasn't. It was the structure of the season wasn't really set up for that type of in-depth deconstruction of it, even though that's what they sort of did. Like they made a show that was all about reveal and trying to set up that reveal and make us think about the reveal and like say like what's this? Who's the bad guy? Is it and
Mm.
revealing the changeling? And we talked about that, and we'll talk a little bit about it more. And at the end of the last one, we said basically like if they can pull off this reveal, I'll say this was awesome. And the reveal, well, like it was exactly just what we thought. It was sort of like the simplest version of what we thought. And but
But they did pull
still,
it off, though.
they did pull it off in that ultimately the premise being to spoil, jump ahead, the premise being that all along, in the end, basically the setup for the old people have to save the day. The Enterprise D is the only ship that will work, so they have to use the Enterprise D. And now it's them on the Enterprise D that have to save the day. I mean, I love that and that premise, and it works within the way that they set it up.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I went on too long. What did
So
you think? What are your initial thoughts?
that's okay. I knew, often before we do a stream, I'll say like this one might be a long stream or we have a lot to talk about. And like I'd say I'm sure the finale even more so will be this way, but like this episode had a lot happening because they were tying up a lot of loose ends and they were trying to make it all make sense and get us to where we are now, which so I will say I really liked the episode. I think it was my favorite so far. I no, it is.
Oh, definitely. It's my favorite new Trek episode, I think, period.
Yeah, there's a lot about it that just the last episode had a lot of rewatchability. Like I actually went back and watched it already like a couple times and also watched the final scene like 6 times and like cried every time. Like it was super emotional for me. Straight up, it actually was like very emotional. I talked to my brother about it and he was saying the same thing. Like we both were texting back and forth saying like, why is this so emotional? Like part of it was hearing,
Rachel Barrett?
oh, yeah, like hearing her voice again was it in itself quite emotional. Um, it just felt anyway. I don't want to talk too much about that scene because we'll get
Yeah,
to it,
exactly.
but
No, 100%.
but it did feel like it was a that was loud. It did feel like it was done respectfully and with um, like you could tell that it was written from a perspective of like respect and love for TNG and for the crew. And anyway, so I really liked it. My biggest kind of gripe, the biggest issue I have is that it's second to last episode. I really wish this had been like episode 5 or 6, like maybe
Oh,
midway through the season. Oh, oh
God,
my. um, yeah, that would be like I really wish that they could have somehow gotten us here sooner and then given us the opportunity to experience it for longer. It feels almost a little bit like it's going to be a tease. Like I wish it wasn't like that. I wish it was just kind of a little bit more. But anyway, so yeah, so the rest of the season is my issue. Again, it's the best season by far of Picard. It feels like what it should have been as the first season. But yeah, this episode was phenomenal in a lot of ways. A lot to love about it. A lot to dissect. But um, yeah, I was pretty. I was kind of in awe, honestly, especially towards the end. But it's like, wow, this is actually happening. Tell
yeah.
me about it,
And even
Mister.
even before the end, I was talking a little bit about how I struggled with the reveal stuff, but a lot of the reveal was set up and it was just Geordi and Data doing the technobabble thing to push the plot, which I love. Like I actually will totally
I
buy
love
that.
that stuff.
And I feel like if they'd just been set up a little bit differently, all of that stuff would have been super awesome. But I at least particularly the first time I watched it, I was like already anticipating how they were going to solve these problems, how they're going to reveal these things, and that hurt my first enjoyment. I enjoyed it much better the second
Sure.
time I watched it. I'll say that for certain.
Yeah.
And I mean, I enjoyed the last bit the first time, of course, too. But all of it I enjoyed the second time after I'd already gotten out of the whole dealing with the reveal thing, and then could just stand back and enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've been able to watch it a little more innocently, like not necessarily watching with like a fine-tooth comb, kind of being prepping for us to review it. Like I maybe especially this episode, and I was able to just watch it with like kind of fresh eyes and just take it for what it was. And um, kind of at a loss for words in some ways how to describe. Like I think really after loving TNG so much, being such a huge fan of that show, and really believing, I think it's like one of the best shows ever created. But I'm obviously very biased. A lot of those characters were some of my favorite television characters
Hmm.
ever on screen. So it had potential to be really painful too. Like it could have been done even slightly wrong, and it would have been like, no, what are you doing? And it wasn't that at all. I think they
That's
like
true.
nailed like in that moment and how that all happened was like my hat's off to you, except my hat's staying on. Okay.
No, fair.
Um, but I want to say also we deserve to brag a little bit because we were right. We were right about everything, like mostly, and pretty
Yeah,
much
I mean, we
everything.
said a lot of stuff,
We predicted a lot of this.
but we could definitely do an edit of all of our lines of saying things that's going to happen or what the like, and we could make it look like we said a lot of different stuff, but we were so on point for so much of it. We could do an edit of our saying what was going to happen, and then we could show it happening, and we would cover like
I
the
probably
whole
will do
first half
that.
of the episode. And like I was saying,
I think I will do that.
I, I, I don't know if it was on it was on YouTube, on recording, or whether we were just talking with Steven. But we even said that it was going to be a Borg cube behind the door. Might have been Steven that
Yeah.
said that though, so I don't know. No, maybe Steven said it in the
Yeah.
chat, and then we said it,
Could
or it
be.
might have been
Yeah,
in
that might be
person.
right.
I don't remember. But so much that like we were just on point about.
Well, we definitely have to give credit to Steven. I think he was the first to kind of point out to me a lot of the things that were obvious hints towards the Borg. And it's funny too, because when he said that, I thought, that makes sense. I watched a lot of other review channels and a lot of other people talking about it. And it was much later, I think, that I noticed other people noticing what Steven had noticed and them saying, oh, there was this hint towards the Borg here or here. But like, think about it. One of the big ones we noticed too was when Vatic said, it's fitting that you're here, Seven.
Yeah, and we pointed that out in
That
that
was a
episode.
huge, that was a huge. But of course, Stephen pointed out right off the jump, episode one of the first things you hear is the log from Captain Picard in the Best of Both Worlds, talking about why he's not sure why the Borg wants him.
Well, let's start with that
Um,
because that hasn't
yeah,
been revealed. So I've been wondering all along: does Beverly know more than she says she knows? Because she was listening to that, but she doesn't.
or was it, or was it Jack listening to it though? We don't necessarily
That's
know that it was
true. It could
Beverly.
have been Jack that was listening. I'm trying to remember the way that scene
I don't
because
think
at
he
the
would
time,
though.
we didn't see Jack in that whole opening sequence. He was in the other room,
Yeah,
and so but it still
and
could have
I
been
don't
Jack
see.
that was listening to it. But anyway, I don't think either of them at that point had any reason to connect the board. So why would they be going back to listening to the best of that particular log?
Well, there was always like when I talked to Steven about it, and we were kind of like speculating, like, was it playing just randomly because, or like, was it just happened to be that scene? Like, it felt very intentional. I don't mean
Hmm.
intentional by the writers or the filmmakers, but I mean like in the plot, was it written in to be like Beverly was watching? Was it just written in to be there so that we could hear it? Um, I still don't know, but certainly that was the biggest hint right off the get go. And here's and there was there's the way that they were starting to assimilate people, which we'll talk about. But that was also hinted. There was a lot of stuff that was hinted that like, but yeah, and we called pretty early on that Jack would be the weapon. We were like, yeah, Jack's
Yeah,
going to
we
be the
got that like
weapon,
second or third
and we also
episode.
called that he was going to leave the ship, and that that he'd be gone, and we wouldn't know whether he was going to show up at Frontier Day and like do whatever he was going to do to be that. We didn't necessarily know how he was going to be the weapon, but we were like, I think I remember you saying it's probably in him somehow, the weapon, and I was like, I don't know about that, but like you called that one,
Yeah, and that was very
so
early on.
yep.
Oh, Steven's got a
So we had a lot
comment.
of that stuff. So,
Steven's in the chat. He
oh
said, "Yeah,
no,
the TNG scenes were all basically perfect. Most of my gripes with the season were the slow setup and the changelings, apart from being rushed uh, stuff up to all the rush stuff up to this episode. This episode was perfect."
and that's huge coming from Steven because Steven, I think for him to call an episode perfect, other than some small things, like he feels that it was really successful as well, and he's a huge Star Trek fan as well. So like, and I bet there's a lot of people. I've watched a few reviews, but like just the general, I don't know what the general consensus on like I feel like most Star Trek fans are really really happy. I feel like
I
that's
would
probably the way it
assume.
is, but
Yeah, I haven't been so connected with broader stuff other than like a little bit of chatting
yeah.
online, but I think everyone loves it. I would just if they don't, I don't know. I mean, I could see
If they don't, then
I could see someone being skeptical of the of it being what, and I remember we talked about what fan service is. I don't even know what it is, but it is a lot of it is nostalgia and fan service. That's what I like. But
yeah,
it's the good. It's good,
it's the good kind.
and that is important for characters that are from developed and familiar.
Well, yeah, the show's called Picard. It's not called like Star Trek new characters.
Exactly. So let's get into.
And
Are we ready to get into it for into our in-depth review?
yeah, well,
I got screenshots for days.
stop bragging. We're all this is too much of a braggy episode so far.
Yeah, we're
We're just
bragging. We're taking.
we're
Uh,
taking it to a whole another level.
we're saying that we were smart at figuring out. And I mean, it was
We
going to be the
are
Borg
the
all
brag.
along. Um,
We are the brag.
so we cut sort of back to where we ended in the previous episode. We get a cliffhanger. They cut back a little bit, which they always do when you cut it forward from a cliffhanger. You got to sort of step back and then reveal it. I noticed that Troy in this whole sequence at the start, Troy's like, "I'll open it for you. I won't leave you. You won't be alone." And she
It's-
immediately leaves him. Before that, oh, this isn't. They added this sort of sequence here. I think it refers this to the as the Crimson Arboretum.
yeah, and then he
And
talks about like the roots underground and how they were all
yeah,
connected.
and there's some thematic stuff to connecting with how, like in his mind, he would what how the Borg might appeal to him. So this is sort of new. I mean, but I think it's sort of an interesting idea to explore why someone would be for the Borg. I'm just gonna throw in. I'm pretty certain I was right that all the red stuff is a late edit, and that even the voiceover and this edit thing was sort of added afterwards. At least that's what it felt like to me. I may be wrong, but it seems like this was edited in later, and the whole redness, and because it was the nebula that the Borg cube transwarped to and met him was all red, and they sort of tried to connect the red versus the green. But
Yeah, and I think if we had seen green, that would have been another giveaway that it was the Borg.
yeah,
But and quickly too, like because we know at this point in the episode, we still don't know officially that it's the Borg. We're just getting these. I mean, we're pretty darn sure, but we're like 98% sure. But they still haven't shown the Borg cube behind the door yet. Do you have a shot of that? I feel
oh
like
yeah,
we
I
probably
definitely
have it
do.
still.
But yeah, then there's sort of the
Well,
sequence
we don't
where
have to.
Troy is like,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
we
I'll
can
open
get
the
to
door
it, but
for you. I won't leave you. You won't be alone. And then she goes to open the door. It's the Borg
there it is.
cube,
Okay, so
and she immediately immediately leaves him alone.
she she immediately leaves them and does the opposite of what like as a counselor would be like a terrible counselor client relationship because she immediately is like you can't trust me because
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you right away because but I mean for dramatic effect yes
No,
they felt they needed to
I
have
think they've intentionally written Troy as being not necessarily a good chancellor, or to be most giving her the best benefit of the doubt. She cares more about the the Starfleet and the Federation and the ship than she cares about his mental health. So she chooses to leave him. And but I think that's intentional writing to put Jack into a position where he's got to get off the ship, right? Yeah.
yeah so there was a lot of yeah there was a lot of intentional stuff between now and where we go next to get Jack to his next point in the plot
Hmm.
but yeah that was a little it was kind of it reminded me a little bit in Titanic when Rose, actually his name's Jack too, wasn't it? The
Yeah, I
Titanic
think so.
character, and she basically says, "No, promise me you'll never let go," or something. And then it's that moment. I've only seen the movie like partially, but then she like literally like lets him go in the ice cold water after like promising she'll never let go.
Right, yeah, and there's like
So
a 20-year-old debate whether he could have survived, like he could have floated
holding on to the
on
raft,
the raft and wouldn't have he
but
didn't
yeah,
die.
so she it is a carryover. There was like so many setups of like I'm going to tell you now, Jack, who you really are, which is what Vatic said. Then the next episode, she didn't. And then this last episode, you know, Beverly's like, I'll look behind the door for you. And then we don't actually see it. They dragged that out a little too long. I know there was other people that were like pretty frustrated as well as we were, but with like, okay, just like get to the point. Um, but I think overall this was done pretty well. The behind the door thing, a little weird, but like I do like that we've never seen the Borg interact with a human like this, obviously. So it's kind of cool to see how it's like how he's viewing like flowers and roots being connected, and he's kind of always had this desire to be connected based on being like, you want to be part of the collective, bud.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that's interesting. I would have liked them to have introduced this way earlier and actually explored
Oh, for
the
sure.
mindset of someone, because he has this line in a couple scenes, we could talk about it a little ahead of time, but he's basically talking about like how like the world he lives in is full of suffering and poverty and bigotry, which I mean, I guess that's because
Yeah.
that's where Beverly took him as a kid. I don't know, but the point is that someone in that sort of, if they sort of explored why is the world now, why is the Federation full of suffering, poverty, and
Oh, God.
bigotry, and why would someone in
Yeah.
that situation actually want sort of the safety and the interconnectedness of the Borg, and what he'd give up his identity for something like that, and
Yeah.
you could explore that in a way that would explain what's going on with the Federation and sort of be super thematic and current, like you could to different themes that we could actually connect with today, where there's a lot of questions that we have to around how much of our identity are we giving up versus safety and things like that. Like I
No,
feel like
100%.
that could have actually been explored and been super interesting.
Yeah, if we kind of look at what we did do or what we did get with the season, which is just a bunch of like over the top evil, well, one really evil kind of henchman character with a bunch of masked goons around her. Um, we again, I think she's in a lot of ways did a great job. Like, seems to be a really great actor, but like it was so over the top and so like I don't know, a bit goofy, and then she just gets launched out into space and turned into ice and smashed into pieces, and it's almost like what you're talking about versus so what we got, which is not even really learning more about the changelings, just kind of being confused by like how they seem suddenly really weak in certain ways and how she was tortured, and none of that really seemed to add up either because we never really went in depth with like what was the plan for the torturing and why were they doing it, and
Hmm.
maybe to create spies, I guess, but then how did the Federation do
No,
that, and then the
I don't
Borg
agree.
got a hold
I think the
of it.
actor was great, but the delivery of she was just a cartoon supervillain, and the backstory didn't really
Yeah.
work for me.
So if instead,
We had this.
maybe we did have Vatic up until like episode 3 or 4, but then we know it's the Borg, and we explore what you're saying, which is like,
We
is there
could
a
have
part of a
even
person that might
explored what I'm saying with Vatic to some degree initially, and then have it translate to Jack's perspective, and then have it translate to the Borg's perspective.
right? So I guess like there's some really interesting stuff to explore there, and really we know now 1 episode left. We're not probably going to get much of it, as far as like because I was watching Best of Both Worlds again last couple days, and I don't remember the line or how it came up, but basically the Borg never viewed themselves and have never viewed themselves as like a big bad guy that's trying to kill and destroy. Like they're assimilating so that they can try to like
Bring order.
make everyone bring order and make races like stronger and better because they can combine technology with the best of those races, and the Borg's always they've always been evolving and changing, and I love like we talked about this with Vatic too, like bad guys are always more interesting when they're not just bad, when they're like they have a goal and a reason why they do what they do, and the Borg is great that way. Like they're such an interesting bad guy because when something wants to advance at any cost, that kind of becomes evil because
Hmm.
then they'll literally bulldoze over anything in front of them to
But
get what
we
they're
didn't see
looking
any of
for.
that. We only just got the Borg now. And like I keep asking for, I'm really, there's a big hole in my understanding over what's wrong with the Federation, what's wrong with Starfleet. I'm cool with that. I think that's an interesting story
They're
to
just bad
tell.
now.
I just wish
Yeah,
that that was explored. I have no idea why Starfleet's a mess now,
yeah,
why the Federation is
yeah,
full of poverty and bigotry. Mac
yeah.
says morning. Good
Oh,
morning, Mac.
morning, Mac.
And Steven points out that basically uh, Jack feels abandoned. His father left him from his perspective, and that in a way, the Borg could be a family that he never had, which is
Yeah.
a pretty, I think it becomes sort of a plot point, but that's sort of a judgment on Beverly's mothering skills. But
Remember too. Well, I was going to say when Jack goes to the Borg cube, he says to Beverly because she tries to stop him.
we have that scene in
Um,
a sec.
let's maybe. Well, do you want to go to because we've been sitting on the Borg cube
Yeah.
shot for a while. So first, there's a conversation with Picard, but this sits pretty well within the scene, but basically,
I had a bigger problem
Be-
with this scene.
sure, but just quickly, Beverly tries to stop him, and
Yeah, they're just
I
thinking,
wanted to bring this
I
up
got it. If
because
we
of
jump ahead,
what you just said about what Steven was saying too. Maybe it's a family, whatever. But when Jack goes to the Borg cube, he tells Beverly that he's going to go and basically show them that he has more than Borg in him, and he's so his intention isn't to go and like be assimilated. He was going to go and
yeah,
because
she
remember
tries
he
to
was going
shoot
to
him.
try to shoot.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's all I was going to say is that initially he thought he could like go be the like good guy that would just because remember the whole season two, Jack's been saying just let them have me. I don't want everyone to suffer because they're after me. But no one would let that happen. They're all like, "No, Jack, go hide in that room, Jack. Stay in that room, Jack."
Well, that's what I was going to bring up is that if you view this in the lens of the treatment of mental health, it becomes problematic, similar to the second season, where their answer is just to lock him in a room. So back here, when Deanna Troy basically finds out, I'll look at here, Deanna Troy finds out that it's Borg that's in it. There's some sort of Borg assimilation problem going on. And her reaction is to leave him, to not care about him anymore, to care about the rest of to care about the ship and the larger Federation because she sees him as a threat now. And she goes to tell him, and then Beverly's like, I should go talk to him. And then Picard's like, no, I'll talk to him and I'll take some security guards and lock him in a room and force him off the ship. Now, but to me, I feel like Deanna Troy's reaction should have been, oh, you have a Borg problem. Well, guess what? We have Seven of Nine on the ship. We have your father, an ex-Borg, on the ship. We have your mother, who has unassimilated people before. We have a competent counselor standing in front of you. We have all the support system needed just for a person in your situation right here. This is something we can solve and work together.
Right.
Like that to me would
End
have
of
made
season three.
in the season two, but it's just it's one of those sort of classic situations where I feel like and I when I was watching this, I knew he had. Remember, I said at the end of the last episode, he's got to get off the ship. So I knew that they were trying to push that, and I just felt like
Yeah.
that to sort of make them to get him off the ship, they had to put him in a situation, and it did make sense for him because he was he had a counselor who said you can trust me, and then totally broke that trust. He had his father who comes in with security guards and is like telling him telling him basically that basically I remember this scene. I don't have a good shot of it, but he's very distant from him in the room, and it's very you could tell that like the point is that he was not being supportive of his son. He was being threatening to his son and saying that you have to stay here. There's nothing you can do. And then he was put in a situation where I understand why he was like screw this, I'm out of here. But I just
Yeah.
don't think the character should have acted that way. And if you look at it from a perspective of, it's the same thing he did to his mother, where it was like the solution to mental health problems is to lock someone in a room until they do something dangerous.
Right. That made no sense. Definitely season two, terrible, terrible. Season three, I wouldn't, in my mind, I wouldn't take it as far as saying it's like, because really he is weaponized. Like I think the issue is they're like, okay, we need to figure out what the Borg want to do with him. How dangerous is he? I do understand to some degree that they're like, and Picard kind of tries to approach it from a perspective of like, I've kind of been here. I know what we're dealing with. Like, we need to be careful. We need to like keep you some. The thing that was weird is he's like, we need to send you away to. Do you remember what it was called?
Oh, some Vulcan, basically it was basically like
Like a
a
jail.
Vulcan mental institute for the criminally insane. Like it
Yeah,
was
that didn't
weird.
make
It was
sense.
sort of implied that it was like they're gonna do mind melds with him, which is
Right.
weird.
So that to me, I agree that was kind of like, because here's the thing: you got to take it from Jack's perspective. He just had a counselor run out on him, like freaked out, and then they're like,
Where's his
"We're gonna."
mother? Where's his
Yeah, it's
support
interesting
system?
that.
It's so yeah.
Yeah, so exactly. That's what I'm saying. So I think like, but given the fact that, and Steven said this too, that like, not sure how else they make him angry. What did he say at them? Um, Plot wise, like kind of like narrative wise, you can see how when they were writing this, they were like, well, that makes perfect sense. Like the best thing for us to do is have them be afraid of him and say we might need to like not let you leave now, and then him say screw that, like I'm not doing that, and then he's gone, which is exactly what happened. And but we
Watch
had
your
called that and said, oh, is it
yeah.
keeps moving? What a jerk. Um, it was obvious that at some point, like we had called Jack's going to be the weapon. Jack will have to leave. he'll be somewhere where he has to then. There's going to be some decision needed to be made, obviously at some point, and we're going to do predictions later. But yeah, I think I get what you're saying, and I didn't have as much problem with it. But I was slightly like it felt a little too much, and it did feel a little bit like you said, like forced in order to just get him to freak out and leave the ship,
And like
which he
again,
does.
I agree that from Jack's perspective, it made sense. I don't think it made any sense from Deanna Troy as a competent counselor and Picard and Beverly as parents who actually care about him. I just don't think it made sense for them. And we've spent much of the season developing the relationship between Picard and Jack, and I just
Yeah,
like that was a
they've
really
gotten closer, and yeah. So
well, he has to get off the ship. I mean, so that's
he has to
important.
get off the ship, and it has to happen fast. We got 2 episodes
Yeah,
left,
he doesn't
right?
have
So
time. But there's
um,
those security guards. Um, Yeah, I was thinking, particularly the tall guy. Don't they kind of look like familiar? If they were wearing those masks, they could probably be the changeling goons.
yeah, you brought that up. Like you said, I think you just brought it up as like, do you think they could have recycled the extras as the changeling goons as like these security officers? And I was like, yeah, they probably did. Like this is probably the same two. Maybe often when people get roles like that, they're like stunt doubles. They work as like stunt people.
Yeah,
So maybe that's possible that they're like stunt workers. And either way, yeah, they probably had masks on for a lot of the filming of this season, I imagine.
which is cool
Um,
that they get to get their faces on screen and wear the uniforms too, because they're pretty cool uniforms. So they probably actually
yeah,
enjoyed
that's
that
super.
scene.
I would imagine not just being masked the whole time. But yeah, he pretty quickly does his. I did notice it took him a bit of time though, like when he assimilates or whatever he does to the dudes that are standing with him. He kind of like closed his eyes. Like it took him a second, and then those dudes he like had control of them. Anyway, it's cool to see. I kind of like this ability he has, and I think it's a cool evolution of like the Borg and how the Borg tech might have
Hey, I just had a
changed and
thought.
evolved.
Up until this
No
point,
way.
the only person he'd really gotten his head in was Sydney and that other sort of younger security guard who got killed.
Yes.
Both of
Yes.
them were under 25, and their parietal lobes hadn't developed yet.
Why should that matter to him?
Well, that's going to come up as a plot point later, but these guys don't look like they're under 25. But maybe they are. Whatever. Maybe they're
Uh,
not human. They're in a certain race where their parietal lobe develops later.
but
I'm
Tim,
saying, for him to do this type of stuff to people's eyes and take them over, does for it to connect? I think it should work better with people, or maybe that's why it was more difficult for him because these guys are a
no.
little
Well, I
older.
think what I was going to comment on is like they're like Hollywood under 25. You know how like you watch
Right.
TV shows with like actors who are in high school and they're like 34-year-olds playing like 18-year-olds.
Fair.
So they probably just were like, see how the guy's doing like a bit of a Blue Steel look? Like maybe they were just like, can you do a young face? And he was like, hmm.
Oh, fair.
Anyway, so yeah, so he does his assimilation thing. Beverly like kind of gives it a small effort of trying to stop him. Like doesn't really. She's like, oh Jack, like you don't have to go. We can send you. Remember, we can send you that really nice place on Vulcan.
They even brought that up. So threatening.
We talked about that. You said you'd like it. It's like a vacation. Anyway, there he goes. There he
He's off.
goes.
He's off. He's off. He's out of there. And then there's kind of a
Yeah,
cool shot of them through a window being just like, man, I was kind of a bad mother.
that's what she's thinking. And
No,
Picard's
she
like, who
said,
was?
he said, he has the worst of us and the best of us. And then she says,
No.
I, I pushed Wesley away and he left. And I held him too close and he left too.
Well, yeah, and I think she says no. He says he had the best of you and the worst of me. I
Right.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
what
That's
it
fine.
was. Um, and then Beverly should have said like, not all the worst of you. He's not bald.
Not yet.
I can say that as a bald guy. I can make that joke. Leave me alone. Um, yeah. So, I actually really
Yeah, there's a
loved this
fantastic.
scene.
I got like several shots of it, but there's sort of, and then Picard's like sort of down, and then Data's like, we couldn't track him. He turned off his transponder, and there's like
Yeah.
a really nice scene. So that's he puts his arm on on his shoulder, and then Picard puts his arm on the shoulder.
Well, yeah, because doesn't Data says something to the effect of like, "How is there something I can do to console you?" And
Yeah,
Picard's like, "Nothing you can do." And then he kind of says like, "I didn't think so," and then puts his hand on his shoulder.
and it
And it's
consoles
really
him.
cool seeing. Well, it's cool seeing Data do things that feel very Data, but feel very Data, new Data. Like it's cool how like
Yeah,
this is like I think the writing Data and the way that Brent Spiner's playing it and the way it's coming across, I actually really love that this is like I feel like if Data had slight emotions in TNG, he would have done things like this a lot because Data was always like one of the sweetest characters on the show.
exactly. And that's the perfect word. They've been able to capture Data's sweetness before he had
Yeah,
emotions, and sort of the new version of Data where he's more emotional, and they've made it
yeah,
work together. Like those are all sort of things where Data would have asked, like, "Is there anything I can do to console you?" Because he would have like
right,
mathematically figured out that someone was sad that their son left, but
right.
he wouldn't have known how to do it. And
Right, he would have kind of like after if Picard had said like, "Sorry, Data, there's nothing you can do," he
he
would
would
have
have
been
like,
like,
hmm, and like,
"Yeah, curious, okay," and then like maybe, or he would have like recommended like, "Sometimes I've read in history that humans like to do this," and like he'd give like something, and Picard would just be like, especially first season, he'd be like, "Stop, Data," because Data would like keep listing things for too long and annoy somebody.
yeah,
But yeah, in this situation, Data was able to take it to that next step, which really, man, there's been a couple moments where it's just been awesome. Like
with
in
Geordi
the
too.
last with Jordy, yeah, in the last episode where he says, "How do you feel, Data?" And he's like, "I feel." Like that was an amazing line. And then here, how he just puts his hand on his shoulder and like, look at that, that's beautiful. Like the relationship that Data has always had on the ship with everyone has been like very, like I think sweet. Like he was just always like caring about everyone, even though he had no emotions. And now he's just able to be there and like kind of emotionally support someone, which I think is super cool to see.
100%.
So
100%.
good for them.
And Data, so
It's
okay,
living
so
in the
Jack
tides.
uses his is being called to this spot, and then he goes to this red nebula. So that's all that red smoky stuff we saw before is this nebula. And but the Borg cube wasn't already in the nebula. He gets there, he detects a transwarp gateway opening, and then the Borg cube appears.
Right. Which is the Borg travel this way quite a bit. They're like transwarp gateways or whatever they are. That this kind of like a typical Borg transportation, and we don't know where this is, so we don't know where in the universe like this Borg cube is sitting, living, whatever, and been growing and I guess constructing itself or however that's
Yeah,
been happening.
I think the implication, there's some screenshots later, and so maybe we'll talk about it then. But it seems like it's not like a 100% board cube. They seem a little weak.
It's a little different. Yeah, there's something different about it. There's a few things obviously, and this would make sense because this is a new form of Borg that can assimilate differently and can kind of remain dormant in somebody's DNA, which I thought was really interesting. Because actually, when I watched the Best of Both Worlds, one thing I noticed is that when Picard was assimilated, and I can't remember if it was like after when they were trying to de-assimilate him,
Hmm.
there was comment made about how the Borg had like rearranged or started to rearrange his DNA or do something with his DNA.
Yeah,
So even back then in TNG, the Borg could kind of manipulate and was messing with people's DNA. So it's always been possible. It just wasn't quite to this level.
yeah, and the thing about the Borg too is that in each sort of major occurrence, from QQ to Best of Both Worlds to Descent to First Contact to Voyager, they've actually changed quite a bit between
Yeah,
each sort of major occurrence. Like they do sort of evolve and change, and
it's what they
or not
are. It's what they
evolve.
do.
They keep using the term. They've evolved again, but they've adapted.
Yeah, they adapt. Yeah, I mean and that was the thing even in that episode too, where like part of what was difficult was you can't attack them the same way because they learn and then they defend against your attack the next. Remember when they were shooting phasers at them and like it worked like three times, and
Yeah,
the
and then
fourth
it
or fifth
adapts.
time it like they had adapted. So that's what the Borg's always been like. They're super awesome at adapting. That's why like for me it had to be the Borg in this season. Like the big baddie. Like some people were even yourself a little frustrated at like it's been in season 1 and 2, and some people use that as a reason why it can't be the Borg this season. They've already done it, and I kept saying, first of all, it has to be the Borg. Secondly, season 1 and 2 don't count. So let's move
Well, I mean
on.
that's the thing. They sort of aggressively. Well, even in this scene. So in this next scene, I think Beverly has the line along we're talking about. She says, "No one's been in contact. Perhaps the Borg has evolved. We've had no contact with the Borg for 10 years."
Right.
So because about actually it would have been 20 years ago now. Um, was Voyager came back in Endgame, the last episode of Voyager, and they destroyed basically Unimatrix. And that Borg queen, and most of the Borg were basically destroyed as far as we knew. So, and by her saying no contact with the Borg for 10 years, they just contacted Agnes's Borg a few months ago. It sounds like that's been erased, or we no longer have to.
Well, Shaw said something at one point in last episode, I think, about how like, no, not that Borg. That's like the shit Borg from last season. Like he said something about like this is different, or like the different Borg that
Well,
I don't know. There was a line
he said
somewhere.
in back in that episode where he tells his backstory. He says the real Borg are still out there.
Right, that's it. Yeah,
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 and
yeah.
we made a big point of
So
that at
like
the time.
they got rid of the this Agnes Borg that was like she was nice and good and was going to guard this spot in space where like bad things could happen. I bet she's still there, and everyone's like she keeps messaging saying, "You guys want me to come back?" And they're like, "No, Agnes, cool, stay where you are. We don't need you. You're good where you're at." Excuse me.
Steven says Borg got better, changelings got worse. It's basically true. And Max says he's mostly busy at work today, so he'll be in and out.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know, Mac. And we'll whether you can comment once in a while or stick around and stay and watch. Always appreciate your support of the channel. And yeah, hopefully you. What did you think, Mac? Did you like this episode? Did you like how they brought it all together? I think you might have missed when we were talking about that at first, but I thought it was pretty great. Curious what you think. So yeah, they're figuring stuff out.
So yeah, as soon as Jack is gone, we
handsome as
get
ever.
the sort of solid like techno babble. Geordi's explaining stuff here. There's two sort of main scenes of explanation. Um, this first one, this is so the second one's the key thing about the transporter, but we don't know that yet. This is the first one where it's all about how a particular how the DNA worked. So that he hacks into how the DNA was set up and how they got the DNA from Technobabble.
What?
I don't
You
remember how to
trailed off.
explain it.
That's okay. You don't have to explain it the same way they do. But like, yeah, yeah. So this was before they reveal about the transporters, correct?
Yeah, so this is the first scene.
Yeah,
Okay,
it
I've got
is.
some clips here. I got some stuff here. So basically, oh yeah, this is an important scene because remember at the end of the last episode, the review, I basically said it's got to be the Borg, but these are all the reasons why it can't be the Borg. These are the ones where they explain it. So I said that there's no nanites. There can't be any nanites in Jack. Um, he doesn't have any transponder. There's a particular type of transponder or something that's in the Borg brains, and he doesn't have that, so he can't communicate with the Borg. And they sort of cover this stuff there because Picard basically says, "Borg, that's impossible. Jack's never been assimilated. There's no nanoprobes in his system. There's no transceivers or receivers." And then Troy's like, I've never mistaken about the Borg. It's definitely a big Borg. And then they introduce this new concept that there's a new type of Borg where it's no longer Borg technology, it's a biological technology that's coming from the DNA. And they've traced that back to
Yeah,
his DNA, and that was in his parietal lobe or prefrontal cortex. And
correct.
that's the line where uh, Beverly says no one's heard from the Borg for over a decade. Perhaps they've evolved. Although, again, the Borg could have evolved in the last decade, but the DNA is from 35 years ago. And then
Yes, yes.
and then Picard, then they talk about like you never actually had aromatic syndrome. That's why Soong kept your body at Daystrom. Um, Instead, the Borg had passed something on to Jack and an organic technology through Locutus. So Jack has some important organic technology through Locutus. And as we get the assimilation scenes later, they're not being assimilated by nanites. They're not being assimilated by, external Borg technology and implants. It's biological assimilation.
Yep, yep. Which is, I mean, I thought it was really cool. I liked that change in the Borg and how they work. Man, the Borg were always such a great villain because for one, they don't consider themselves a villain. They're not like just trying to destroy stuff. If you get in their way, they'll assimilate you, and if you're not necessary to them, if they don't care about you, then they just walk over top of you. Like, and Mac was also saying similar to you actually about like how all the things that he had said about but the Borg can't do that. They dealt with. So you can tell the writing is self-aware as far as like what the questions the viewers might have, and how they could address that. And they clearly thought a lot about this. They like clearly thought a lot about this. They had really all the bases covered, which in an episode like this, like when you were saying, okay, if it's the Borg, they better explain it really well. And I think they did. And I think they really covered it in ways, and there was a couple things where it borderline could have been an eye roll thing, but it wasn't, because it was just like, just solid enough, just made them, enough sense, but was also kind of like almost fun in a way where you're kind of like, I kind of like that. I kind of like that the Borg can do that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that, like the weird, like it only affects young people.
Yeah, I
But
like
it's
that stuff
smart
a
because
lot too.
it got us somewhere, right?
This scene I was less sold because I sort of anticipated all these problems, and but they addressed most of pretty much all the problems I had. The main problem they didn't
Yeah.
address it was sort of how Beverly couldn't have noticed any of this stuff, whether we're back 35 years ago with Locutus or at any point with her son. And and then she does say a line, I think, in this scene where she's basically like, "How could I have missed that?" And Picard's
Yeah.
like, "Well, you were a good mother otherwise." Like, and I mean, that's the end of
I
that. And
know,
I
because
mean, she missed it. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's what happened.
well, and sometimes you miss something that you don't know, like,
You don't
is an
want to
issue.
believe is an issue.
Like you don't know that like your window seals are messed up until it rains, and then you're like, oh, I didn't notice the window seal was messed up until it rained. Because how would you notice? You're not going to be looking at your window seals like trying
Maybe.
to explore the.
But if you're like a window seal installer and that's your main job, and you've had a history of dealing
But she was never
with
a Borg specialist. She's a doctor, not an engineer. Damn it!
the Borg are a little bit well, but either way, they do address all of like pretty much all of the problems I had with it, all the sort of things that I said didn't track historically,
Yeah, didn't trek.
didn't track. And then they bring up a point like, so this was part of the plan all along. The changelings have been working with the Borg from the beginning, and as we speak, Starfleet's joining in one. Starfleet is gathering everyone in one location, Frontier Day. Um,
Frontier
I think
Day.
Worf says that, and then we see a Frontier Day. Frontier Day is kind of ridiculous, and then they're like,
It was
"Man,
ridiculous.
we got to get it. We got to go to the Sol system right now."
Space fireworks.
And oh yeah, and then there's Frontier. So then they basically go tell Shaw, and they're like, "Hey, Shaw, we got to get to Sol." And then Shaw has this great line. I didn't write it down, but he's basically like, "You mean we're gonna go to the one place with all the ships that probably hate us?" And says something about like our faces pinned to their dartboards. And then Picard's
Right.
like, "It's our only option."
And I think he's just kind of like, ah, fine, let's do another one of these things that you guys keep getting me into.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it doesn't get me killed.
Oh,
Anyway,
for sure. And then, so we're ready to get
poor
right into
Shaw.
it.
Yeah. So this was cool. Um, you had mentioned you thought this might be a place where we would see Janeway, but
Yeah, I was
instead,
expecting Janeway to be this role, the sort of speaker, main introduced speaker for Frontier Day.
um, I mean, let's just circle back quickly. I mostly loved the episode. There were parts in the beginning that had mixed feelings about, but that ending. Did you cry, Mac? Because I did. Also, I love the Borg explanation. Covers all the things I said. Oh no, we already read that one. Also, best use of transporter trope in Trek history. Young people make sense too. By the way, I called the fleet being used to attack Earth nearly a month ago. Oh, so there's another prediction. Um, yeah, well, that's.
Oh,
I mean, that's.
that fleet was definitely going to be used for evil.
Well, two is funny. Oh, what's her character
Well,
name?
I think she even says, I don't know if it's in this shot or maybe just the next shot. She's in Shelby, but she says, in
Shelby.
case
Yeah.
of the unthinkable, fleet fleet-wide incapacitation, we've invented this thing where we connect all the ships. And what is she talking about? I don't. So if there's a
Why is
situation
this?
where everyone in the fleet is instantly incapacitated, then what we need to do is connect all the ships.
Yeah.
I
Um,
mean, the changelings
and
must
that's
have done
and
this,
that's a good
right?
idea.
The changelings must have planned this from the start. Like the changeling must have been in
I
Starfleet
don't think
for
so, Tim.
years, and
I don't think this was a changeling thing, but I mean, you could claim that, but I don't think this was like some evil plan of the changelings so that the ships could be. I mean, you could be right, but I think if it was, they would mention that or like show that. I think it was just there's the fireworks, the
If I right.
space
And that's the
fireworks.
Enterprise
No,
J
J.
F. There's
Where the
another
letters were getting.
Enterprise that she was flying.
Another Enterprise, and it's a big celebration. But yeah, I didn't think. I guess
Yeah,
in
there's
my
the
mind,
ships
like this episode,
formating.
the episode's great. I love like so much about it, but this part, the whole um, this day and how this is transpiring, and how she decides to say all the ships act as one ship, and then of course the line was it Picard or Riker?
I think
I
it's
think it was
Picard
Picard that
says
says
it.
that
I have it here.
ironic,
The irony of
how
her
Borg-like.
informing something so Borg-like.
So the irony being both her character's role in Best of Both Worlds, where she's like the Borg expert and helps them to deal with the Borg, and has a fun little catty relationship with Riker, where she's like gunning for his job, and it's a great episode, a great two-part, and eventually her and Riker become like good buddies, and he's like, if I was going to be a captain, I would love to pick a first officer like you, with that gusto and whatever. Anyway, so she's here, and it is a little bit weird that she's also, with her knowledge of the Borg, it's like, let's make our fleet like the Borg, and have all one mind and be controlled by a central hive ideal. There she is. And hopefully this doesn't go badly for her.
Yeah. No, she doesn't last long.
Just like
I mean,
Shaw.
that's why it's not Janeway, right? She ain't gonna survive.
Yeah, they had to. So they created a character who was more of a cameo. I mean, they did the same to Ro though, where they were like, let's bring Ro in for a bit, and then just like have her blow herself up driving towards the Intrepid or whatever it was.
I mean, we can talk about that again, but I'm not certain. Well, I want to talk about Ro when we talk about the transporters. But we got to cut.
Do it.
We're cutting over back to the Borg cube. So Jack beams in. He's got a phaser and he's got a plan. He's gonna.
He's got a phaser
He's
plan.
got a phaser plan. He's gonna. His plan all along was to. He wasn't coming here to
He'll
help the
kill the
Queen
Queen.
do a bunch of evil things because that's what the Queen wanted him all along. He's come here for mercy to shoot at her. But
Yeah, show her what's what.
we only see her from the back. It is Alice Craig's voice for First Contact.
The voice anyway.
Yeah, but we don't see her
We
from the
haven't.
front. It looks like with
Yeah.
all the wires and stuff, like we were saying in the moment ago, that the Borg cube is just sort of rebuilding itself still. Like it's not in a great state. And
Mm.
I think it's implicit that the Borg don't have full access to their technology or their science, and that's why they needed Locutus's brain and Jack, right? This isn't as
Kind of, but
strong as the Borg 35 years ago. This is a weaker Borg that needs to
is
rebuild.
it though? Like,
It
because
must
if the
be.
Borg, but if the Borg can do what they can do now, aren't they like way scarier?
But if they,
Although I guess they couldn't do anything without using the changelings to
yeah, they
mess
couldn't do
with
anything
the
with the changeling,
transporters.
and they can't do anything without Picard and without Jack. They needed Jack.
Yeah.
So that's the scene's coming up
Yeah,
now.
that's true.
So basically, he's like, "I'm trying to shoot you, but he can't." And then
Was that your Jack impression?
the Borg sort of tubular wire things come at him,
Nodes with the spikies,
and he gets
spiky
spiked
nodes.
in. So
He's done a great job, by the way. My hat's off again with my hat on, to I think his name's Fesher McZorbit. Was that his name? Fesher?
the actor who plays Jack.
Yeah,
Oh,
Fesher McZorbit.
I don't know
Someone's
right
gonna be really
now.
mad that I said that. Anyway, he's done a great job. He's a really good actor. Like,
Yeah, he
because even
is.
in this moment, well, look, like he's in this moment, he's being assimilated, and he's like basically crying. Like he's always emoting to the greatest degree. Like he's a really good actor, and he looks really cool as a Borg. He reminds me a little bit of like T-1000, the actor who played T-1000 from Terminator. Like he has a very kind of, there's something about his face that can
His
look
high
really evil and
cheekbones.
scary.
That's
Yeah,
his cheekbones are
makes
just a
sense.
little too sharp.
It's all about the dang cheekbones. um, but yeah, so you said how he had his phaser out, he was trying to shoot the Queen, and he actually physically couldn't do it. And I think she said something like, "You think I'd give you the ability to shoot me if
He
I..."
said you would have shot if you could have
Something about,
shot me, you would have already done it.
oh Yeah, if you could have, yeah. So he clearly he even if he wanted to, and that
He
I
shouldn't
think
have
made him
gone
even more
there.
angry. No, he shouldn't have gone there because now he gave them what they wanted, and their plan goes into motion.
Well, that's the thing. So I didn't get this the first watch through. It's not the next. It's not happening yet because we cut back to what's going on the Titan.
Oh, for sure.
What's the scene? Oh, this is the part where they figure out the next step before it happens. So there's another sort of scene
Okay.
of exposition of technobabble coming out of Data and Geordi where they figure out everything, and basically they've discovered this system architecture with the transporter code. So there's something new here that we haven't had before. That
Hmm.
the way the transporter works or works now is it saves space by caching consistent DNA elements from major species so that when you reconstitute a person from a buffer, from the transporter buffer, they can save time because they just already fill in the gaps from the
Hmm.
consistent DNA of that species.
Right. And so
Which is really interesting.
we've never, it is really interesting, and we'd never seen that level of detail about the transporters. And that's a cool thing because it gives a new level of understanding to the technology, which I think makes it feel more real. And yeah, I like that. But then it's been taken advantage of
Hmm.
here
Yeah, so
because they
they find
noticed,
out that someone has added
right?
basically to the transporter code of all the ships, including the Titan, something basically based on the prefrontal cortex, perineum, forget the word now. Basically, prefrontal cortex, the parietal lobe that they got from
Yeah,
Picard when it was the Locutus code, and they've added it to all the transporters. So, they're using the transporters to assimilate everybody, and that
yeah, and I like how
I
that's the
think that's
next shot,
Jordy's line. He's like, they've been assimilating us all along.
which is, I'm sorry, but that's freaking genius, man. Like that's genius from the perspective of a villain doing that, but that's also genius from the writer's perspective. Utilizing this tech that Starfleet uses all the time to change people's DNA just in such a way that they can then be controlled, almost like a fleet of zombies. Like they become a little, almost more like zombies than Borg in some ways, because they don't have any of the Borg implants that we're used
Yeah,
to
so they're a
seeing.
little different. They're because it's biological. So there's no nanites or Borg implants involved at all. It's something from the DNA that's a programmed biological technology. So this is where I wanted to bring up
Freaking
about Ro. So you remember back in the Ro episode, Ro was like, I don't use transporters. I'm coming in on a shuttle. And remember, we thought that was because of the Force, that sort of admittedly awkward scene at the end where she's on a shuttle and she's going to die, but she has time to tell her Picard what she needs to tell Picard before she dies because she's on the shuttle, and then it sets
yeah,
up for why everyone on the Starfleet doesn't trust them anymore. But
yes.
are we to read that she actually knew there was something wrong with the transporters, and that's why she wasn't using the transporter?
Well, she said there was a line, and she said something about I don't even trust the transporters. So I don't think that it's that she knew what they were doing, but I think she was suspicious and didn't trust the
Because
technology
the,
and
the
was
the
more
original
comfortable.
changeling we knew about was the transporter operator.
Exactly. And Shaw brought that up too. He was like, out of all the jobs that the person could, like, why a transporter, like, so there were
Yeah,
hints
there was hints there
throughout.
that sort of would make sense. And then remember in that episode there was this big plot point of them beaming all the people around, and it's sort of awkward.
Yeah, yeah, that's true too.
And it's like, well, this is because they're getting everyone off the ship, but then there was still a bunch of like young people on the ship. So, and a lot of them are killed by the changelings when they came on. So I feel like
Yeah.
if Vadic had killed all the kids on the bridge in that scene where she was killing people, then there wouldn't have been any problem at this point.
No. Um, so that's the other interesting thing that we find out. We find out that out here, do we? I can't
Yeah,
remember
this is
when we find out.
the transport thing, and then they find out the transporter code's happening, and it happens right now. And like, this is going to happen, and then they're like, man, we've got to tell Shelby. So this is the scene where she's like, the changelings have infiltrated Starfleet, and they're assimilating everyone on the Borg, and then Shelby's like, what's going on? That doesn't make she doesn't really react to it,
I don't like that.
and then it's like the ship's being taken. When they get there too, the ship's being taken. They're trying to take over the ship too, and that's sort of a foreshadowing of them taking over the kids. And then we cut to this scene. which must be on the Borg cube, but this is the technology that's activating the DNA to do the biological technology to make everyone, all the kids be assimilated, and they needed Jack for that. So I didn't understand this. I sort of missed this scene maybe the first time I watched it, but I think they needed Jack to be wired into this thing to activate
Yeah,
the assimilation step.
yeah.
And I'm pretty
Well,
sure
because
that's what happened.
he gets the designation of Vox, whereas Locutus was meaning spoken or speech or what is it?
Voice. Oh yeah,
Voice?
yeah,
No, Vox
we
is
went over
voice.
that sort of line where he references all the Latin. I think it's sort of a subtly a reference of the Latin titles for episodes. That was in the previous couple scenes ago. Oh,
Right. So,
Mac
yes,
agrees with us about Rose suspecting something about the transporters. Steven says that Vadic ended up killing of the three. Vadic killed the oldest, the Vulcan, who was presumably the oldest one.
they all looked pretty young, but yeah, I guess maybe she was older.
Maybe
Well, Vulcans are
I
always older.
don't think Vatic really cared about that. I think because they were definitely killing a bunch of young people when they were in the hallways in those sequences.
Yeah, strategically it would have been smart, but like I don't think she was. I think she was just like, I'm so incredibly
Yeah,
evil.
I'm such a
That's all
Bond
she cared
villain right
about.
now. I guess gotta be really unpredictable because the most scary villains are the unpredictable ones.
Right. Oh, I wanted to bring up something because you had also talked about like transceivers and all this stuff. One thing that people have pointed out too is that um, Picard in First Contact could hear the Borg in his head even without a transceiver. Remember, he was like,
Yeah,
"I don't know
at the
why I'm
start of the
hearing
episode,
Borg."
he had that dream.
So what
I've always
what I'm
interpreted that as a dream, as more psychological than him actually communicating with the Borg. I know they touch on
yeah,
that throughout. I know
how?
that's a plot. I know they do touch on that in First Contact. That he can sort of like sense
But what I was going to
them.
say is what I was going to say is this obviously First Contact, the writers didn't have any connection to the writers of this in a way where they would have planned that, but it kind of gives, even whether it was a dream, even if it wasn't a dream, we can say, well, that's because Picard had some evolved version of Borg DNA in him that he didn't know he had yet. I think that's pretty cool, actually, to say that like that the two can actually make sense now in some ways. With comments, Vatic decided between killing three and killed the oldest. Oh yeah. Um, Yeah, during the battle he heard them, so it wasn't just the dream thing. Like he could hear them
Yeah,
in
yeah, he
different
could hear the
situations.
Borg, and even when he was the one who sort of just realized the ship was being assimilated.
So I just think that's kind of cool. But this is how I perceive this thing that we're showing is that it was like an amplifier of Jack's voice out to the
Yeah,
people who were assimilated, so that he could activate them,
yeah, that's
which
probably a
we
good
actually
word
call
of
like,
amplification of his voice, and his voice was the control to assimilate everything.
and look at this thing. Like this is someone did some pretty cool prop
Uh,
building or
it's
CGI
cool.
design on this.
I'm confused about how big it is and what it is, though. There's no like
That's
it
I
needs
like
to
that
have
about it.
maybe it was and I missed it, but this scene and it sort of was closed and then sort of opened. It got brighter, but it should have had like Jack wired in somewhere or something. You know what I mean? Maybe it is and I don't see it.
I see what you're
But
saying, but
that
like I
to
don't.
give
I
us a
didn't
sense of
necessarily.
scale and the connection to Jack, because like I said, the first time I watched through, I did not connect that what this was or what Jack was doing at this point.
It sure looks very Borgy though.
It looks Borgy and it's green. And then so Seven sort of gets it, but I guess she's too old. Her parietal lobe is too developed.
Well, it's affecting her though. Like she's like feeling like pain, or it's like it's messing with her that she can hear this voice coming in to like start activating people, and she's like, "Dang, I don't like this," she says. Um, oh yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
get these
yeah.
sort of reveals of
This
all
was
these
such a
people.
horror. It
Yeah,
was such a horror moment.
such classic sort of horror
Um,
reveals.
all right, see you, Mac. Yeah, because literally, like, we know they're being transformed into something evil, and this dude's the back of his head for like a long time. They're just looking at it. We're like waiting to see, like, yeah, there he
Bond's
is
like,
looking at it.
"What's going on?" I forget his name. Like
Well,
he's just
because
like
he
asking him
says,
to do
doesn't he
something.
say, yeah, he's talking to him. He's
He's
like,
like ordering
Ensign
like,
so
"We
and
got to
so, do this
move," or
thing.
well, yeah, he like orders him to move, go because he's the
Yeah,
tactical
and just like
officer.
no response, no response, and then you're like, is it gonna be so scary? There he is, and he is scary. Like that's pretty creepy looking. Oh, locutus is to speak, and vox is voice. That's what I was trying to come up with. Locutus. So they're very similar, but that's why it was like one is to speak and one is the voice. I don't know. I thought that was also pretty clever. And Vox isn't the worst name. It's not as bad as like Sneed or Crivelli. Oh yeah, I gotta wear my hat. I always forget to wear my hat cool like this, like a little bit sideways. Um, so
What's the?
wait, you don't like it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You messed
Oh,
up your
I'm
your
missing some
your
screenshots.
order.
Oh no, maybe that's a
Uh,
screenshot. Remember I said I thought I lost a screenshot?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm missing some screenshots. I'm missing several screenshots.
Well, we can make it work.
I'll
So,
make it work. Just have some opinions.
did we so they do explain that like he can only affect people who are under a certain age who have are still developing their parietal
Yeah, so
lobe
they
or whatever it
discovered
is.
that just in the scene before that, and Beverly says that your parietal lobe develops at 25. You know, that's sort of one of those things that they say usually. I don't know how scientific it is or how solid it is, but it's one of those things where your brain doesn't fully develop until 25, your frontal lobes.
Right, but I liked in like because okay, you're a writer's you're a writer's team. You're trying to come up with how to get the original crew on the um, you need to be able to have some Borgified people being attacked, being turned into Borg, bad stuff happening, but you can't have any of the original crew Borgified.
Being
How do you go
assimilated.
about that?
There has to be an
Uh,
excuse for just like the old guys to save the day.
yeah, exactly. And I just thought, honestly, like if you're gonna do it anyway, this was the best. This is honestly the best way to do it. They
No,
found a
it
way
works
to,
at the end,
yeah,
and I love this. Like in the end, I think that that aspect works.
yeah, exactly. I think it did work. I think it was interesting. I think it got us to where we needed to be. Well, again, I wish it was sooner. I wish all this had happened sooner. Maybe not the Borgified stuff happening sooner, but like just some of the Borg stuff, not
Yeah.
keeping it for so long to be like, ooh, but it's the Borg now. And it's like, okay, cool.
No, and like I
So yeah,
said,
Sydney's
I
assimilated.
liked this dynamic a lot better the second time I watched. The first time it was just too much thrown at, too much sort of in line of what I was thinking. That I was just like, oh, it's
Yeah,
that thing again. Oh, it's that thing again. And I just,
I felt really bad for Geordi.
yeah, well, both of his daughters, and you sort of see like an understanding of why this sort of idea of all these kids were sort of introduced too. So it adds the stakes of us caring about these characters who are being assimilated.
Yeah, he's literally the one that has like the two kids that he brought on to this mission, if you want to call it that, where he like really didn't want to, and he was like, I want to protect them, and I don't want them involved in this crap. And now they're
Hmm.
assimilated by like
Yeah, I like
basically
that
by
story better
Picard's
now
son.
too. And there's a
Like
line at the end of the episode where I think Janice says it that like they're part of our family and we're gonna save them.
that was nice. Yeah, there was a couple lines like that, and I think that we can get to that and talking about how that came up because yeah, later in the episode, pretty cool stuff. Well, oh no, what's happening here?
Yeah,
This
so
doesn't look
she's
good
still
for her.
clueless, and then um, she gets shot. And the
She's not. She's not a changeling.
the trans yeah she must not actually I don't know because I don't think we're gonna see any more changelings. I think the changeling plot is done and gone. And I think we're meant to assume that all the changelings were killed too. All the assimilated kids say eliminate all unassimilated. They say it
Yeah.
out loud, so we know what they're about to do. But presumably that includes the changelings. I think we're supposed to assume the
I
changelings are
don't
all dead too,
know.
and we don't have to worry about them anymore.
Mm, again, that's an assumption. Like we just probably won't hear about them, and we can assume that they. You know, I'm gonna say I think the changelings all went to Ryza and are having nice, relaxing vacation.
Uh, what's that drink that Data could make? The sunset?
Tequila Sunset? No.
No, I forget it now. I'm sort of forgetting stuff. But anyway, so I think she's pretty solidly dead. We see the phasers hit her, and
Oh no, she was shot by two close, like pew
yeah,
pew, right in the. It
she ain't coming
was
back.
pretty bad.
And
And,
Jordy's like, "Where's
and
the
Jordy's like,
kids?"
not Shelby. Just kidding. He didn't react that way.
No, he didn't care about Shelby, but he does care about his daughters. And Data's like,
Oh, of course.
"Nothing we can do." And then she like takes the captain's chair and is like,
Right. Yeah.
um, "Eliminate
So
anything."
then,
I don't know. She says something about like, or no, I think she at this line she says something about let's go destroy the starbase. Oh, okay. Then they all sort of run away in the turbo lift, and then we have this sort of sequence where we just see audio of the captain of the Excelsior, and then we see that the Excelsior, he's like, I'm the one ship that overtook the, to retook the bridge, and then all the other ships destroy it. Um,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you can't stand out amongst this. You don't want to in this situation. Like he really should have just hid amongst the ships and been like, "No, no, we're one of you. Like we're good."
but
Yeah,
I gotta
exactly.
point out though, the Excelsior, USS Excelsior, you know who's on that ship? Elnor. The last we saw him was just a few
Oh, I
months
didn't know that.
ago. He was on the Excelsior.
Of course he was. So that's like
And he was
another
a
reason. Although
cadet, and
didn't
they weren't going to leave him off the ship on Frontier Day. They would have beamed up all the cadets to be assimilated.
right, but didn't Elnor die last season?
Yes, but he came back at the end, and then he was back on the Excelsior.
Right, it was in a different universe. I don't
Yeah,
know. That's
remember? And
just so.
then Q was like, "I could still survive, but I could use my last bit of Q-ness to save Elnor for plot."
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, let's not bring it back season
No,
two.
what a
But this,
so bad.
to have it to choose any ship to be the ship they destroy, the Excelsior, seems a little on the nose about.
About being like F you to that season and those characters.
Yeah, maybe
Steven
because I've
said it's the
always been like
Sumerian sunset
Sumerian Sunset. Oh, I should have remembered that because he could
because he
lost.
somehow lost at chess to Deanna.
Yeah,
Remember that? That made
yeah, that's
no
right.
sense.
Like only he could do it. And that was that's like, and I remember I watched that episode all the time. That's Disaster because that's
Yeah.
a scene where they all get zapped and then everyone forgets who they are, and Data thinks he's the bartender in Tim Forward.
Yeah, that's so good. I need
Um,
to watch that one now. I love that episode.
yeah, it's classic. But I lost my train of thought with the
That's okay.
Excelsior.
Well, so
But
so they
it's
blow
gone.
up the Excelsior. It's
Well, I
gone.
was
A
just
lot of
gonna
the
say like maybe Metalis, because I've always said like Metalis was technically the head writer in the showrunner for season two, but maybe he wasn't. Like maybe because you know like there can be behind the scenes drama, and he actually was cut off of that writing room and then moved on to the other writing room. Like
well, he was like co-showrunner with what was the other guy's name
oh,
last season?
the main guy that they keep putting in.
I did look this up because I was curious, and I think actually this is the first season where Metalis is the only like he's like the sole showrunner now for this season.
Yeah, and he was a
Um,
co-showrunner with
so I do think he had more control. I think he's got a little more of an upgrade on like the influence he has on the show. Um,
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, yeah, it's seeming like I have not wanted to give credit to Metellus, but
I want to
maybe
give him credit.
he's deserving credit out of this. Maybe he
Well, if
deserves some.
he's not, who is the
I don't
changelings?
know. I don't know. But yeah, let's
Maybe he's the changeling.
move on. Okay, so then they come out of oh yeah, there's this sequence because of the way the Excelsior was destroyed. They realized that they can't. They only he was only able to communicate using the maintenance thing. There was this one spot that there's a shuttle that they know that there wouldn't be anyone guarding it. So they're like,
Right,
hey,
yeah. So
everyone
they
meet us at the maintenance shuttle. And then they see the crew and they're like, this
so
is the
look at
line where Deanne
sorry.
Troy's like, never happy to see so many gray hairs.
Yeah, that's true. But I was gonna say, look at Troy in this still. She just really doesn't look badass at all. Like
Well, Troy's
Beverly
pretty
looks
cool.
super badass, but Troy is just kind of like, I'm pointing something at you.
Well, just because of my screenshot her mouth, because I think she's saying that line at the moment. But
That's probably what's going on. And I never noticed until the screenshot that Raffi has the weird like holster and like
has a
setup
leather
going
coat.
on. Like she's almost wearing like chaps or something. I don't know. It's
Yeah, she does
awkward.
have a holster on. Is
Um,
that where she's keeping
I do
those
love their
knives?
outfits. Probably, yeah. The stupid knives. Why is she fighting with a phaser now? She doesn't fight with a phaser. She fights with swords. What's going on? Stop it, Raffi. Stop it. So shoot, I keep forgetting. There was one other thing I wanted to. Oh, before we get too far beyond this, which I mean probably won't, because it's kind of a. I don't know. Did it happen already? Did they say the line where they were like, how does it go? Starfleet is now the Borg or something. It's like a line where they made it really obvious that, and I thought it was like kind of a silly line because um, we already knew we already knew what was going on, but it was like a very obvious. The Borg as the collective say Starfleet is now Borg or something.
Oh,
Did you
I
not
think
write this
that
one
was
down?
what the two scenes ago, her, what she said, something like that, and like we've taken.
No,
I think
I
it
think
was
it was
said at a
said at a
time where
time where you
you
like you
hear it
hear it Oh, did your earphones die or
Yeah.
something? Darn. So I'm probably extra for. Um.
No, we're good.
Anyway, it doesn't. It's funny that there was like a line that says Starfleet is now Borg. It's like, oh, okay, thanks for letting us know that everyone's assimilated now.
Remember exactly the line,
What's that?
but I don't remember exactly the line. Oh, there's a good moment where Picard's like, "We will get them back." Her daughters,
Well, yeah, because Geordi,
his daughters.
I think at one point he's kind of like
Jordy doesn't want to leave.
doesn't want to leave. Yeah, so he's like, Geordi, there's nothing more you can do. Let's now you sound Borg. Uh oh. Is it
And
me?
oh yeah, then so they
Am
get
I
into the
echoing?
shuttle
Tim, can
first.
we figure out that problem if it's happening?
No, I'm
Oh,
back
you
in.
fixed it. Okay, perfect. Okay.
Yeah, so there's this great line where so Jordy actually this is an awkward sequence of scenes if you rewatch it. But there's a great line here where Jordy is like, remember how that goes?
I was forgetting all these lines.
Oh, but basically Jordy's like, Data, could you try to be a little more positive? And Data's like, I hope we die quickly.
Yeah. I totally forgot about that moment. Yeah. Um, and look how happily he's saying it.
Yeah.
And that's just
And Jordy's just like,
that's pretty date that's another like kind of like data joke. Like he's still android enough that he's like a little awkward. Jordy, you can't leave. Just all the TNG crew have to.
right, they basically split up to the TNG crew leave, and then the non-TNG people stay behind. Um,
Did we talk about that? Because
I'm
that's
okay with
when.
that. No, what's about
Oh,
to
okay.
happen. So that's what I was just segueing into about how this scene's really awkward because they're already on the shuttle, but some characters haven't gone on the shuttle yet. So some people are, the rest of them are staying out behind to fight the bad guys
But
off.
not Jordy and
And there's
Data.
sort of a classic situation where Shaw's like, "You guys get out of here. I'll hold them back."
Yeah,
And he
get
basically,
shot.
so far in this sort of fight chase sequence, the Borg kids have basically been like stormtrooper rules. They've been shooting all over at them, but not hit
Right.
anything. But they do hit
Good old Shaw.
Shaw. And the first time I saw this, I kind of like laughed a little bit, because it was kind of exactly word for word what I sort of expected to happen to Shaw. Like it was a little too
Mm,
cliched. The second time, I sort of liked it better. Um, Again, this episode I liked way better the second
yeah.
time.
They didn't get a lot of
And
usage out of Shaw. Like he was just specifically there for certain things, and then he'd disappear again. And sometimes his foot was hurting or something, and he was in his quarters. Remember that when he just like. But then he was
yeah,
in the 10 forward bar at in the holodeck or whatever.
yeah.
And he
And
was
the
back.
thing is that he never really had that arc. And he does have so he has a line here where he finally calls her Seven of Nine. But the last we saw him in the previous episode, he was still calling her Hanson. And there was never really a point where he learned
He's about to
the
die. Is
reason.
he about to die?
Like,
He's probably like, I should probably die
he's
saying
about to die.
nice.
He better finish his arc.
He better finish his arc before he dies.
You better finish his arc. But there is a significant line here. He does say to Seven, the ship is yours now.
Right.
Or the
You're
ship
the
is yours. He
captain
might have even said the ship is always
now.
yours, or at least he says the ship is yours, which is I think a pretty cool setup because Seven and Raffi stay behind. Raffi runs in. Oh, I don't have a shot of it, but Raffi runs in to protect her too.
Spin off.
So they're being left on the Titan. So I think they're sort of set up into a Die Hard situation where they've got to retake the Titan. And
See, the thing that sucks though is like that could be its own one
yeah,
full
that would be
episode of
a whole
this.
episode. We're not going to have time to
Yeah.
see any of that.
No.
I think we won't see any of that. I think they're going to show up at some point to save the day
I
next
help.
episode. But all of them taking the ship back is going to have to be off screen because we don't have any time for that.
Yeah, or just like really, really quickly done. But yeah. So Shaw's dead. So we've lost our sarcastic, angry, sometimes funny buddy. Um,
Although I got to say, that just like yesterday, the actor who plays Shaw did a tweet where he sort of suggests he might have shot something for the last episode, so he might
okay.
be coming back. No.
It was no, that was a changeling that they killed, not Shaw.
Yeah, that was a pretty solid, like clear. That was a pretty cleared, like, and like I said, a little cliched to death. Like that was a straightforward.
Yeah. Um, so then they decide. So they're leave. This is like leaving the Titan, going towards
Yep.
the hangar 12. Is it
And
12?
yeah, so they're like we're getting out of Earth,
that basically Geordi has hinted towards. He's
Oh
been
yeah, and
like,
this is the line where she says, "We will destroy Starbase One," and I think she's sort of like, "We're going to simulate." Oh, I did. I think I wrote down what she said.
we don't see it though. Did you notice that?
Target space
Like,
dock, eliminate planetary defenses. And
oh,
then
there
this
was
this is
one.
what we see. So we see all the ships sort of close together, and are they supposed to look like DNA? Because they were in the same sort of formation before.
Were they? That was something I was trying to figure out. Like, is this
They
supposed to be like
were
some?
like it was a similar formation when they first were doing the formation before they are well assimilated.
Was
So
it like a Borg
I don't
shape?
think it's like a Borg affiliate. I think it's similar to what they were doing before. Because I did
I.
sort of try to rewatch that and figure that out.
But can someone explain to me like why, if they're going to all be kind of a hive mind thing, why they had to make this weird shape? Like, what's the deal with this shape?
Well, it has to be some sort of shape.
No, it can be shapeless, formless, be like water. You'll miss all the heavenly glory.
That's if the Borg had listened to the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, they would have assimilated Earth a long time ago.
Don't think, feel. I want to
Feel.
hear Data say that.
That would be pretty cool.
He's the one who could say it now. Um, I don't know. I just thought the shape was kind of weird. Like it's supposed to be something. Someone tell us
Yeah, it
if
looks
it's
like
supposed
it's
to be
supposed
something.
to be DNA like or what's that word I'm looking for? Compoundish. You know what I mean? Like a
Right.
some sort of
There's something
compound bound
biological about it
DNA.
almost.
But no, I'm pretty sure it's similar to the what they were doing initially.
But they don't. So they're talking about destroying the starbase or whatever, but they don't do it.
No, they
I
didn't
was kind
want
of
to show
hoping
us
to see,
that.
like, I want to see a big like, pew pew,
Yeah.
a big
Well,
poo poo.
that's the end of
So,
that.
so that's the end of that.
And
And
they're
so
back at the Fleet Museum, and they're going to a certain Bay
don't
12.
do it yet. Don't do it yet. Don't do it yet. Let's be like the writers of Star Trek Picard and like cliffhang the audience for like another 3 episodes. What's behind? And thank God they didn't cliffhang this one and do kind of like what's behind the door, and then it like starts to open, and then it's like next time on Picard.
Oh my God.
I would have
Because, oh
thrown
my
my
God, I would have been so angry with that.
I would have thrown my TV out the window. But gosh, so we all kind of had pretty strong reason to believe, even like I don't know, whenever 3, 4 episodes back when Jordy mentioned Hangar 12 or Sydney or somebody asked about Hangar 12, and he was
Yeah,
like,
these other guys.
you know, and there was some people saying that it had been. I don't know if Metalis mentioned it or something, and then at one point you had mentioned maybe they saved some budget for rebuilding a certain ship set. And I honestly, even at that time, I was like, "There's no way, like that I'm lucky enough in this life to like see this happen." Like I just, but anyway, as they're approaching this Hangar 12, I started to get like chill. I was like getting like really excited, like, "Oh my goodness, is this actually going to happen?" And oh my goodness,
Dun,
oh
dun,
my
dun,
goodness, what is
dun.
that? You do the
That's the
song. Ba, ba,
Enterprise.
ba, ba, bum, bum, ba, 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 ba. Like I don't know when I started crying exactly. I think it was probably once they were like on the ship. Maybe though it was when I first saw the ship. It's so sad. I don't know like why it was like super emotional. I was just like even just seeing it's so funny how the ship itself, just the shape of the ship and the Enterprise D like is so
Mm.
nostalgic to me. It's very very like it feels like a second home in a weird way, like a photo of an old apartment I used to live in or something. You know when you see like a photo of an old house and you're like emotional, like that's what it felt like.
Mm. No, 100%. Maybe too, like the fact that we've had to go through 8 episodes and sort of had all these sort of references of nostalgia that haven't really paid off, and then like
It might have
maybe
made it
that
more
was
powerful.
intentional. Maybe that was building up all to this.
You know, like there could be something to that. I certainly don't think it was in this moment when I'm watching this episode and I've watched it since, like it's still having an impact on me. So definitely I would say from here on out, this episode, um, I don't think could have been any better in any like I don't think they could have done a better shot or like it could have looked cooler or more interesting or like directed better. Like I just from this point on I was like just all in and going for an emotional roller coaster because
Hmm.
yeah, it
Yeah, it's
just was
weird,
so
and
intense.
I feel like because I was looking at there's only like 10 minutes or something, or there's not many minutes left in the episode, like 8 minutes,
No.
and it feels like it's way longer.
Oh, like, I wanted it to be. I was like, can I just like live in this moment for the next like, can this be 3 seasons long? Just this.
And
I almost
Steven
feel in a
just pointed
way.
out, along with what we're saying, I almost feel like just having one episode of the TNG bridge is perfect. If they had it all season, they might not have been able to nail it. So if they had gotten to the
Sure.
Enterprise D like early in the show and they just spent the whole time on the bridge, it would have. I don't
I
know.
don't know. Well, there would have been more chance for complaints. Like we might have been like, they wouldn't do
Yeah.
that on the bridge, or I don't know. But like as it stands, and I'm hoping that the next episode, for the majority of the episode, they're still on the bridge. I mean, they should be. I hope it's not just like a quick like, oh, we used the Enterprise D to get here, but now let's get on this other ship or something like. Um,
They can't do that.
but shoot, yeah, no, I think that overall everything about this was just like was
Mm. And
super
they did.
intense. Oops.
Oh, they did a classic one of those. Whenever they've introduced them, they did that with in Encounter at Farpoint, and we saw it again in All Good Things, and back in the motion picture, the classic, and even the first episode, Caretaker of Voyager, and in Deep Space Nine, there's sort of the introductory shot of them coming on the shuttle, see the ship, and
Yeah.
they sort of pan around the ship, and we get this is what this scene is, and they all sort of just like talk about how much they love the ship. And yeah, Data
So
makes a point
great.
about like saying like why do I feel emotion?
Yeah, and he starts to choke up. He's kind of like like he makes this like kind of cough,
Yeah.
like because he's like choking up. And then who was it that responds to that? Jordy maybe. Um,
No, I think it's
Beverly.
Beverly or Troy says like it's beautiful. It is beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And then Geordi says like of course we couldn't have used. Oh no, he explains that because remember the engine section was destroyed in Generations, so he used the
Right.
USS Syracuse's engine,
And,
which we don't know anything about, but presumably its saucer section was destroyed. And then he says, of course we can't use the Enterprise E. And everyone looks at Worf.
right.
Worf's like, it
Uh,
wasn't my fault.
and then also they brought
Uh-huh.
up that the reason that he could retrieve the ship was because of the Prime Directive. They had to basically take the saucer section off of the planet
Yeah,
that it
they
had
couldn't
crashed.
leave it on like a potentially habitable planet that could someday evolve to another species, like a species. I don't know if there was any species on this planet at the time,
Yeah, I don't know.
but
But
someday
even
someone had to clean it up.
right. And even like there's several things, several layers to the emotion of this scene. Like you're seeing the characters, but you're also thinking about these actors and how the actors themselves lived a big part of their lives as kind of like a an acting family, like a family that worked together on this show and got to know each other really well.
Mm.
And from what
And
I've heard and understand, I think got along quite well, liked each other, all liked each other
famously,
quite a
they're
bit.
still huge. Like, I mean, Brent Spiner was Picard's best man for his previous wedding. When Brent Spiner did his own album in the early '90s, he got them to back out sing. Like they've done that, and they're particularly the TNG crew is famous for being getting along
And
really
that's
great.
huge. And but and part of like when if you're making a TV show out there and you want your cast to have chemistry, like see if they get along, like maybe get them to meet first and before you actually cast people, because like the chemistry comes across, you feel that the chemistry. So anyway, that added a lot of emotion too, just thinking about these actors kind of revisiting this. But also the idea of Geordi, like I love that it wasn't some other way that the ship got here. I love that Geordi, it was a labor of love, like he refurbished it, like he brought it back. And I also love that he was kind of like saying that he was planning to surprise them with it someday.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was like so great that basically it was like, yeah, I wanted to save this as like a surprise. But so I just love that element that like Geordi has been working on this. Like that makes it even more beautiful. I don't know. There's like so much to it that's just great.
Mm.
RC5150 says, seeing the Enterprise D and the bridge with the Goldsmith theme got me in the feels. Took me back when I was 17 and seen the pilot episode of TNG. I mean, live long and prosper. 100%. Um, like even talking about it, I'm still just like feeling the emotion from it. Steven says, obviously way more powerful because of the nostalgia and how much time we spend on that ship, but remind me a lot of the submarine scene in The Life Aquatic. Yeah, actually. And that was actually a really emotional scene. I remember
Hmm.
that scene being like, that's super emotional. They did such a good job of in such a silly film of making that scene like really beautiful. Um, yeah, Max says he watched that scene got like maybe 30 times. Like I just honestly like I kept going back and I was like, this is intense. Like just anyway, shot for shot. Look at them. Like so he comes on the bridge. They all come on the bridge. Lights are
Oh,
off.
yeah,
You
yeah.
you kind of yeah, you kind of have that fear of like, is it going to be lit the way it should be lit? You know, is it going to look the way it should look? Like there's a bit of a fear of what it's going to look like. And as the lights come up, and it's funny
Jordy
too
says
because the
computer
lights,
lights
yeah, and the
reflecting that.
lights didn't immediately go boom on, but they
We
kind of
saw like
like
all the
faded.
computers log on and
Yeah, so like at a certain point, it was still pretty dark, and I was like, no, they lit it really dark. But then all the lights come on, and like I almost like I'm glad they didn't because it would have been a little too silly. But it almost would have been funny if one of the characters said like, you know, oh, the ships back in the day, we really liked to like actually be able to see where we
well,
were
he does
going,
make a
or like
joke. 'Cause I
carpet.
got tons of screenshots, but he does make the carpet joke. I'll add that screenshot too. And it does. And I mean, I was expecting them to do a little something a little different with the way they were doing. I thought they were going to mix up the sets a little bit more, but it is definitely a contrast between Titan's Dark Bridge and then them going with the Light Bridge, and that seems to be an intentional contrast. Thank
It
God the
sure
light.
is a yeah, no, like it was so important because it's a bit of it like what a lot of fans have been saying. Like I was talking to my dad about this today because like it impacted me that much that I've been like talking to everyone about it. That like the Gene Roddenberry's vision and what worked and what made sense is like this hopeful, bright look at the future of humanity. Like that's a powerful stuff right there. Like it's not some small little like, oh yeah, we go into space and we fight aliens. Like no, it wasn't that. That's not what the show was. It wasn't about fighting aliens. It wasn't about like space war. You know, it wasn't one of these shows. It was about exploration and learning and growing and you know boldly going. Like I even love that that was the line, like to boldly go where no
Mm.
one's gone before.
But you say that though, but I do feel a little bit like the Picard, even season three, hasn't entirely lived up to that, or at least it hasn't followed through with exploring the Borg, exploring why the Federation of Starfleet's where it's at, uh,
Yeah. So the
dealing
point
with any of
I
this
was
stuff.
making, the point I was making is that you're 100% right, and it has been still dark. The Titan is still dark. There still is this drama. There was still Vatic, who's this bad guy that we never really learned enough about Vatic to have empathy for her and be like, I kind of like her or learned about her. But what I felt is when the lights came on the Enterprise D, like when the bridge was lit up and that reminder of like what Star Trek was, I guess what I'm hoping is that it now influences somehow going forward with Trek and when new shows
It's
are
like
out and what they're doing.
a perspective that we want to have.
Yeah, like I almost feel like could it be a perspective change? The lights coming on and being like, this is hopeful, this is bright, this was the bridge, this is what we did. Someone's got to get that and sell that for what Star Trek is now going to be in the future.
And Steve points out
Maybe not.
just now in the chat, I know a lot of people like a lot of shows, but I'm not sure any show has that sort of iconic lighting and just noise and background sounds and things like that that are so identifiable, like the set of the
Yeah.
TNG is.
Well, I was watching something where we had all gotten excited because the crew last episode for the first time since First Contact or whatever was all together in one room. But we forgot somebody. It wasn't the whole crew because the ship was that final member of the
That's a
crew.
good point. Yeah, 100%.
The ship is that last character that wasn't there. That just like people talk about Seinfeld, and like the location becomes something you fall in love with and become
Yeah,
familiar
and to
with
be
and
honest,
feel safe in.
I believe that's something that Rick Berman of all people always said that the lead or the star of the show is actually the ship. The lead cast member of the show is the ship.
I think in this scene and as it unfolded, it became, I guess, as I was watching more clear, like how important the ship was, and how I really love the design. I love the way that they put this together, and I think it stands the test of time. Honestly, if you looked at the original Star Trek original ship and bridge, and you tried to bring that back, like that would fall quite short of like looking futuristic and looking like it could still work. But the TNG bridge was badass. Like it's a great looking bridge. It's got enough nostalgia and kind of like old school vibe to kind of make it even better. Um, but they did a darn good
Yeah,
job.
I agree. This is my definitely my favorite bridge. I love Michael Okada's, you know, user interface design. It still is bleeding edge, modern, futuristic.
Exactly.
Like that's absolutely genius. And the seats and like the chairs and everything has sort of a retro feel to them. Um, but classic
But classic, like in a way where
and
sometimes
timeless in a way that yeah, we don't always get.
that's the word I was looking for, timeless. Yeah. So they're exploring, they kind of come on the bridge. They're all at first, I think. Now, I have a question I'd love to hear from the director, the production crew. When the cast came onto the bridge here, I know that some shows have done this in the past to get real reactions from their actors. I wonder if this was the first time that the cast was seeing it. Like if they actually brought them on and said, like, we want your live reaction to seeing the bridge again.
Oh, you're scratching quite a bit.
Oh,
Okay.
dang it. Did you hear what I said at least?
Yeah. You said I wonder what the cast's reaction to first seeing the bridge was. I haven't seen it yet, but Will Wheaton's
Oh yeah.
um,
Ready Room?
Ready Room show. I think it was released late this time around
Yeah.
because of some things, but I imagine he'll have some interviews along that line, and I know that's something he's gonna ask about.
So a few comments there. The 10-hour ship noise YouTube videos. I watch those quite a bit too. It just shows how much we all became like comforted by that sound of like the engine running. Picard season 3 is the first time Star Trek has ever made top 10 streaming programs. It will definitely have some influence. Exactly. That's kind of what I was saying. Like, I think that
Yeah, I read that
this is a
article.
powerful.
It was top 10. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, so I just, when I was saying when the lights came on and the cast was here, and that people are responding so powerfully to this and saying, this is what we love. And I just hope it does have more influence than just kind of being like, nostalgia and a look back. I hope it can kind of influence a bit more of where we go. I didn't know how it was doing in ratings, but makes me happy. I don't think it was their first time. Frakes had definitely seen it. Ah, okay. I don't know. I just like, regardless, like seeing them come on and turn the lights on, like it must have been. I can't imagine for the cast what that felt like. And everyone had a chance to kind of say a few things. What do you remember? Did you write down any of the lines? Aw.
uh,
Marina Sirtis like looks truly like, I feel like out of everyone, and I love that she played the counselor because I think like you could kind of sense from her. See what I did there? Um, that Marina Sirtis was always like a fairly sensitive, kind of sweet person. Um,
well, I guess
but anyway.
Worf makes a comment about wanting more upgraded phaser arrays, and
Oh right,
then Troy's like Worf,
yeah, and
and
then he says
then
it's perfect.
she's perfect, Geordi.
He's doing
There's
a
a
little
cool,
little
important line. Geordi says that there's drones working to uh,
torpedo bay or something.
set up the torpedo bay. The drones are loading, so that's how they can make it work. Maybe like we've seen Data fly the ship on his own and stuff, but if anything goes wrong, they need drones that are in the engineering to fix things. Um,
It
and
did get
then
me wondering about drones and like the idea of autonomy and sentience, and because like often in Star Trek, there's never just a simple drone that doesn't have some kind of. And you brought up like the exocomps, and that was like a big deal to be like these little kind of working machines actually um, had their own sentience and. But anyway, these are drones. They're just drones in the torpedo bay
I think they're
loading
just
torpedo.
like computerized drones, not the
Right. Like I don't think,
philosophical
but
drones.
it did get me thinking, like, how have you been treating the drones, Jordy? Are they happy down there? Or is this, I mean, there you go. Then if they could stay on the bridge and they kept doing, that could be an episode plot. Jordy didn't treat the drones well. Oh, the
There,
plaque.
there's the Picard.
That,
Picard walks over to the plaque where it was, and it's.
and that was emotional too. Like
I
just
like the
seeing that.
plaque. I like the ship plaques. That's a pretty
Well,
cool
they
plaque.
do that, right? They do that on ships, like in the Navy and different fleets. They'll put plaques on them, like commemorate them. And so it's cool that the Enterprise has this. And this was funny too because I found because Data's kind of in his feels, whatever, and then suddenly he
Hmm.
he kind of snaps out of it and goes, "Ah, what? Are you sure this is not connected to the Borg.
Yeah, yes. Are you sure we're not connected to the bad stuff? And then Geordi says this is the only functional ship that isn't. So
Yeah,
basically,
so
it's the only. So none of the other ships that he has at the museum are really set up to be functional. And this is the. So it has to be the Enterprise D. It's the
it
best
has to
ship
be the
ever.
Enterprise D. It had to be the Enterprise D, and it had to be the Borg. And Data had to like go over and touch the chair, and then kind of like jump back and go, "Wait, are you sure we're not connected?" There's a few comments coming in. I just don't want to miss too much here. Okay, so they did talk about it on the Ready Room. I gotta check that out. And that Frakes talked about it. For some reason, in recent Star Trek shows, it made me think they couldn't do this sort of show again. Right, but like I hope that's wrong. Even Data gets choked up. Yeah. Remember the Shellyak episode where he keeps them waiting and wipes dust off the plaque? Yeah, yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a similar shot too. Yeah,
yeah.
this is where
Because
Geordi
Picard's
says
whole
that.
thing there was just to like purposely keep them waiting, and then he like to waste time, he like goes and wipes
Deflect.
dust off the plaque. um, so what's Geordi's line here? Well, there's the
That's
carpet.
what he says that he explains that they're setting up that the ship is not connected to the
Oh,
bad
right. He's
network.
responding. He's responding to Data's question. Correct. That's a cool. Look at
And
his
then
uniform. Friggin' cool.
yeah, I love those leather. We've mentioned them a few times, but yeah, I love the leather uniforms. They're definitely the best.
And I gotta
Um,
say, like, Jordy also looks so cool. Like, he just looks great.
yeah, he does, and
Um,
he's been great. Like I think he's like the as far as acting, him and Brent Spiner. But you expect Brent Spiner to like to ham it, to go crazy, to being aggressive, like to be a present actor.
yeah,
I
he's
feel
gonna
like
like have fun with it.
LeVar Burton's definitely like he's been like to me the shining actor star.
And he's actually, I think he's had a few moments in this season where he was able to actually show his acting chops more,
Hmm.
even more so.
More than we've
But there,
definitely we've seen from the movies or like
yeah,
often even the show
I mean,
because he didn't
he's had some
have a
huge
family
roles.
and yeah. And now this is the line where he's like, the thing I missed the most, the carpet, because the other ships don't have the new ships don't have carpets.
Yeah, and it's funny too because this. So thinking from a filmmaker perspective and how they shot this, and it's an interesting because they um, I don't remember ever seeing such wide shots when I'd watch TNG, like a really wide
Well, it's hard to
shot of
judge,
the
right? Because
whole.
we never saw widescreen on TNT.
That's
We
true. Good
definitely
point.
had
Yeah,
the sort of shots from this perspective
yeah.
often, but we didn't
But seeing
have
it
the
all at
wideness.
once like that.
And the wideness seems perfect. And I remember they did it a little bit in Generations, but they did the different cinematic lighting.
Yeah,
That's why I think we were a little worried it was going to be the cinematic lighting, not the classic lighting. But
right.
I think the bridge is perfect for the wide shots
No, it
or
is. It looks
the wider screens.
so good. But yeah, the carpet is pretty great. And you know what? It's funny too because on several levels, like anyone who, whether you grew up in the '90s or born '80s, '90s, or have memories of that time, in people's homes, carpet was like huge. It was really popular. Everyone's house had carpet, at least in Canada. I don't know, but it's just kind of suddenly people realize carpets get really dirty and they can like smell. They have to be
Yeah,
cleaned all the
carpets are
time.
less
Like
popular than the last little while. And I
why do
know
we have?
that
Yeah. So the
I think Gene Roddenberry, maybe even Gene Roddenberry a little, but definitely Brent Spiner would made sure that all of like Voyager sets were all carpeted and stuff, so that they wouldn't have records feet fall
well, I
while
mean
they're
that's a good
walking.
point. So practically speaking, for set design, carpet is way better for audio engineers because you're going to make less clickety clacky noises on the floors. So I'm sure the audio engineers love that. Um, but ultimately, I don't know if I ever remembered seeing the carpet like pop so much as it does in this scene, like being like it really pops. Um, but man, like it just looks so good. I wonder where the set was built and is there one that exists somewhere where you could go visit it? I always wish that there was a hotel built like the Enterprise, and you could literally like go
I
stay in the
think there
hotel,
are. There
and they would
definitely
play.
are a few rebuilds of the original series bridge around, and there's one in
Imagine
Montreal.
if in imagine if in the hotel like you stayed at it and they play that ship noise like everywhere in the ship in the hotel, and so you could basically like, oh, that'd be so awesome
Well,
if it was like a live action role play.
Las Vegas hotel, Las Vegas Hilton Star Trek experience in the late '90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
At the time, it had like a little bit more Deep Space Nine stuff. Like it had the entire, it had like basically you could go to the restaurant and bar, and it was Quark's bar and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
promenade. And
I don't know. That would be a dream come true to
no,
go
that'd be
stay in a
awesome.
hotel that literally, like, when you go and walk around it, you're like on the bridge, and then you walk down a hallway and you stay in one of the quarters, and you could like go visit Geordie's quarters or like Data's quarters. Anyway, bring back the carpet. Yeah, the ship's plaque goes all the way back to the original series. So look at Captain Picard. He's looking
Yeah. So he basically
suddenly more like himself, and a little. He's got more confidence in his face, and he looks assured and strong and capable, and
is, yeah.
I
I
like
think
that.
this is the part where he's like a computer, um, and the computer's like, USS Enterprise now under the command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, and then he's like, I'll accept the field demotion. And it's Mitchell Barrett's voice is the computer, which I was really hoping to hear again. I think it's all
I got to
original
tell you,
clips that they're reusing
yeah,
from TNG. They haven't like AI did it.
not AI. Yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
yeah, I
Honestly,
love
when I
hearing
heard
that.
that voice, when I heard her voice too, like that was another moment of like of emotion because it was just like
And I've missed her.
perfect. First,
I've noticed she
oh,
hasn't been in.
100%. And that computer voice, like she just did that so dang well. And obviously, also playing Loxana Troy and like some of the different, and she was in the original series too, and
There's
played the
Chapel and
computer voice for
Una.
a long time, and just was such a perfect place for it made the ship even more comforting and more recognizable and more familiar.
And
So
all the
very
lights
smart
turn
move.
on. And you pointed out
And
all
this
the
is
lights turn on throughout the ship, not just the bridge. So they're wasting tons of
right.
energy
So
just to light up the ship
yeah, I
to
was
make it
thinking,
look right.
imagine the energy they're wasting turning on all the lights everywhere, like all the like. But you have to do it. Like you got to see the ship looking like this. Man, what a good looking ship, though. Like honestly,
Yeah, I still think
um,
it's a great design. I've always been. It's got that sleekness and style. I've been a big fan of.
oh, it's the perfect combination of like all that stuff. When I was a kid, just go back to it for a second. When I was a kid, I was obsessed. Like I really loved like fighter jets, and I remember I used to really also like the idea of like going really fast. I thought it was cool that certain jets could go like Mach 2, Mach 3. I would like study about what that meant and how that would like affect the pilots. But there was a ship called it was made by Lockheed, and it was called the Blackbird, and they still no, I don't think it's in production anymore. But the section of the ship below the warp nacelles where it kind of goes, I don't know how to explain it, but it looks a lot like that ship that I like loved as a kid too. It had this cool like basically the angles, the way the shape of
Right.
it
Well, I
there
remember. I don't know
looks
if
a
that's
lot.
the type of ship you're talking about, but there was those sort of anti-radar design ships that were all like
It was
smooth.
one of those.
Yeah, yeah, and they had that sort of like feeling, so that the radar would like bounce off. I don't know the sign.
Yeah, yeah. So it was one of those ships, but it was also built at the time. I remember reading it. There was like an article about it, and it said it was like one of the planes at the time that could fly faster than a bullet. And as a kid, I was just like, that is the coolest thing ever. Can you imagine going that fast? But that's not even bringing into play, warp 9.99. Picard is about to get his Kirk on from Star Trek 3 on speech to the crew.
Mm.
It's going to be
Well,
a
I
big
think we
crew
talked
speech.
about that as far as two predictions for the last episode. And
Yeah, it would have been
saying,
cool. The thing is, it's almost unfortunate that like it would have been fun if Geordi said, "Oh, by the way, like I fixed the ship, and there's some people living on it right now," and and then Picard had to address them. It might have been cool to see him go over the intercom and say like, "To the people on the Enterprise right now, like we're gonna go do stuff. Hang on
yeah,
tight."
but yeah, that doesn't make any sense. But yeah,
It
that
doesn't
would be
make any
cool.
sense. But it would be kind of fun. It'd be kind of fun. Then they could go to like 10 forward and be like, "Oh, Guinan's just down there." Like she's like, "It's about time."
Oh yeah, that'd be great if Guinan just happens to somehow be there.
Yeah.
I wish he was. This is Whoopi
Actually,
Goldberg
I
just
do
shows
wish it
up and
was.
just to give some advice.
When I was watching Best of Both Worlds again, I was realizing too how great Whoopi Goldberg was in certain scenes and the character of Guinan and how she would kind of always just show up at the right time to be the ship's actual counselor when Deanna Troi wasn't doing her job. And she almost always gave better advice than Troy. Is this the engage? No, not yet. Or is it?
No, he's on. I think he's like, let's take him out. Oh, there's a really nice speech. I think it's no, nah.
Well, one thing I want to
Yeah, this is at the end.
we
But
forgot.
there's a speech where
Sorry, well, I was just going to say we forgot about the part where who was it that asked, "Will it fly?" And then Geordi says, "I don't know. What do you think, Captain? Or what do you think, Admiral?" And then
Oh yeah, that's back in the
I
shuttle.
know,
He's
and
like,
but I wanted
she'll
to
fly.
say that because it's such a great line. Because then Picard says, "Oh yes, she'll fly," and I was like, "Ah, look at."
They sit down. Yeah, no, I think this shot I think is when the ship is like activated,
Yeah,
and then
coming out.
he's like take it, and he's like, oh yeah, he's like Geordi, take her out, and Geordi starts flying the ship out.
Yeah,
The ship's out of the
look
body,
at
and
that.
then there's a great line here
Oh,
where
even just seeing this, like, Picard needs to be in the captain's chair. Like, and Troy, look at she's sitting in the Troy way, like she's sitting in front
oh
of your
yeah, that's
thing
true.
die again.
This is the line where they say, Jack, Alondra, Sydney, they're our family too. And Riker says, Jean-Luc, wherever you go, we go. And
Right,
he's like,
because I
thank you,
think
number one.
Picard says something to the effect of like, I'm sorry that you guys are. I forget what he says, but yeah, Riker says, "We're the crew of the Enterprise. Where you go, we go."
Yeah. And then, yeah, and then they all sit down and then that's this.
Yeah, and then Worf's like just about ready to fire some torpedoes.
Yeah. All systems on.
He's
And
just rare, and you can just tell he's like, "Fire torpedoes. They had better not destroy it." I know. No, that's a good point. They better not destroy it next episode. If they
oh,
do that,
yeah. Oh, man.
okay, let's talk
Well,
about let's
yeah,
get
we're
to
going to talk
predictions.
about that. So let's finish off the scene because then we
I
have
feel like Guy.
the, he
That's
says,
the way
make
he
it,
was.
he says, both make it so and engage in this scene. So first, uh, he says, like, Geordi, we'll need everything within the shield, make it so. Then he says, aye,
Right.
sir. And then he's like, Data, set course for Earth, maximum warp. Aye, Captain, course laid in. And then he says, engage. And the
Engage.
ship, so we're leaving where
And it felt so. Oh my goodness! Look at it. Look, I like how you got the screenshot of like post warp, where it's like there's a streak it left. Yeah,
and that's the end of
man,
the
look at
episode. And
that.
it goes, and it goes into like the classic TNG theme.
Yeah, which also is just I don't want to say another character, but the theme song becomes again like part of
Hmm.
that tone and the setting and the feel. Like I'm 100% after we finish this episode, I'm going to watch TNG because that's actually what I did after I watched this episode. I went and watched some TNG because I kind of wanted to see the contrast between the crew on the ship and how they act, and then the crew on the ship. But yeah, I mean, gosh, the bridge looked amazing, and the one thing is obviously seeing Picard as his younger self. He certainly like had a confidence to him that I feel like he's lacking
Yeah, we've
in
been
playing
waiting for
Picard
that.
now. But I think he could still pull it. Like I don't think it's gone because he's older. I think an older person, like think about Clint Eastwood in that film where he was like super badass. Like just because you're old doesn't mean you can't hold
That
your own. And
Gran Torino.
anyway, let's see. True has to be somewhere on the Enterprise. Not sure if 10-4. Okay, so they're talking about if the Enterprise will be destroyed, and Steven's just saying it has to end somewhere on the Enterprise. Not sure if they built 10 forward or the Ready Room.
I
How
get it.
many times has
So yeah,
Picard
that's something we
said?
could talk about.
Ask you to this
After the
season.
bridge is obviously the most important set. If you do you think they built a second set, and what would be the next most important?
Just quickly, that and Mac was saying like it was kind of a redundant question when Picard keeps saying like, "Sorry, I brought you along on this, and you don't have to do this," and then Max saying it's kind of at this point they don't really have a choice, do they? Like, is he just going to drop them off on this planet and then go by himself? Oh my goodness, yeah, got goosebumps from this entire scene, 100%, teared me up. I mean, I was full on crying. Like, I'm not ashamed to say I was crying. Like, I was legit crying watching that whole scene. Um, do you hear that, Tim? I was crying. So I'm glad.
Really?
Hey, it's funny because we were all going to watch it together. I'm glad we didn't because that would have been super embarrassing.
I think I would have enjoyed it. I think more if we were all watching it together.
That's true. Yeah, it would have been, but I would have maybe held in the tears because you know you would have needed to give me a comfort moment like Data gave Picard. Put your hand on my shoulder, and I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Oh yes,
But
thank you, Tim."
Stephen answered my question I just asked about what the next set they
Oh,
think, if they did a second set, what do you hope it would be? And Stephen
engineering.
says
Okay,
engineering, and I agree with that. I think that the next most important set, if they could do it, would be engineering, and that'd be iconic for Geordi and Data, and for like if they need anything done, that's where they've got to do it.
right. Yeah, like it makes sense that you'd see Geordi, we need this done. You need to reroute this power from this to this. And um, it'd be funny if, because you know how Geordi's restored the ship himself. It'd be funny if, like, because he restored it, he like put a bunch of photos of stuff he likes on the walls in engineering. It's like, I don't know, what does Geordi really like? Falcons. He's gotten a lot into like falconing. Isn't that a thing? So maybe there's like pictures of birds on the walls in there, and Geordi's like, yeah, don't mind that. This is anyway. I don't know what I'm talking about.
RC
I doubt there's any other sets
5150
built.
says maybe 10 forward. They could play poker or something cool in the last.
Yeah, we talked about poker,
Yeah, so if
but I
they
feel
play
like because
poker, they just need a crew quarters because they always just played in Riker's quarters. So that
when I also just feel like because they ended TNG
oh, they're
with
playing
playing
that.
poker, I just don't think they're going to do that here. But it's certainly iconic.
Well, let's see how I think it's going to end. We can talk more about what we think is going to happen next episode. But I think I've said this a few times since I think maybe even the first episode. I think it's going to end in more of a classic um, Star Trek Undiscovered Country way, where where Kirk was like second star to the right on till morning. Like I think they're going to have that sort of like them on the bridge. We're still going. We're going to have one last mission. It's,
You think so?
yeah, that's what I feel. I think everyone's going to live. I think everyone survives. I don't think they kill anyone. I don't think they destroy the Enterprise D. I think they fly off in the Enterprise D. I think they even fly off to the Enterprise D like against orders. Like everyone's like, "You saved us, good job," and they're like, "We saved you, see ya," and then they just leave with the Enterprise D. Like we're going off on our own
Bye.
mission now. I think that's
Bye.
how it ends.
Well, here's the thing. Like, would be cool whether it's a captain's log or Picard saying the famous "to boldly go where no one has gone before." What if he says that? What if like somehow it either because
That would
it
be
for some
cool.
reason that was always iconic too, but maybe he like revises it like slightly, so he's like
Hmm.
to boldly go without permission. Where no, I'm just kidding.
I don't know. Well,
Um,
because they sort of riffed on that in at the end of Wrath of Khan, and maybe also the start of Search for Spock. And
yeah. Did you have any more photos, screenshots?
no, this is the last one. This is the end of the episode.
Okay, so
Is that?
right, yeah, and so well, let's talk about. I guess so. What we know is happening now is moving into the next episode. Um, Borg has control. Enterprise D is the only safe place to be. We do know Raffi and Seven are still on the Titan, so we think maybe something will happen there. Crew's on the Enterprise D. It does have some weapons. I don't imagine that this ship alone, um, without some crazy plan, is going to be able to do much against the armada of ships. Now, after watching Best of Both Worlds, of course, Data famously implanted the order to sleep into the Borg. Will it be something like that? Will they find a way? No, you know what? I think it's going to be through Jack, and I think maybe Jack will somehow. It's going to be Jack that because Jack is the voice. He can maybe speak to the Borg and say, "Don't hurt my dad. Don't hurt my dad."
Yeah, well, I think Jack has some power. I think is that we're gonna have it, and I hope it's not like this, but a little bit like the first season with I'm not remembering names all of a sudden. Sochi, where she had that moment like, do I do I summon the evil Robo Cthulhu to kill all life in the galaxy, or do I not? Like we still haven't
Right.
had like the Jax can try to take over and not do it. I think it's gonna be more straightforward. Jax can try to not take over. Um, but we do need some sort of resolution to that Jack dynamic. I think because on one hand, so they've got sort of an older ship that's less weapons, but even if they had like the most advanced starship, they're still going up against 80 other ships, right? So it's
Oh
not
yeah.
like
No
it's
chance
like
against.
technology. But I gotta say, what they do have is they have Geordi, they have Data,
Data.
they have
They have
engineer,
Troy. Tim, come on.
they have Troy, they have the deflector dish.
Yeah. If you have Geordi and Data and the deflector dish,
They got something. They're going to figure out something, and they're going to use the interconnectivity somehow against them. They're going to hack into it and do not
yeah.
the sleep thing, but something like that. They're going to hack into it. They're going to use their strength and their interconnectivity against them, and they'll have the strength of like individuality, and they'll prove that that's superior, and they'll save the day.
I'll almost be annoyed if they like completely destroy the Borg. Like I'd almost rather they win, they get the Armada back, And then we see that because we don't know where that Borg cube is, right? Like Jack got there through this transwarp, like whatever.
Oh, he didn't get there. He got there
So,
through regular warp, and then the cube transwarped in. So he can't
oh
be that
really?
far.
Oh,
Yeah, he can't be that far. Although they've really fudged distances. I don't know. I don't have any sense of distance or anything.
well, so what I was gonna say is like I'd almost rather them win, like get the Armada back, get people deborgified, and Jack's back, but that this Borg cube, this new advanced Borg cube, it'd almost be cooler to just see it like warp off, and then we're like, where did it go? And they're like, we don't know, like we couldn't track it. That would be cool because just like good guys in shows, like I don't necessarily need them to like completely destroy the Borg and then be like, oh, they're defeated. We defeated them. Like, no, like just win this
Yeah,
battle, but then they should warp off and still be around.
maybe there is that sort of post-credit scene of some sort.
Yeah.
It could be one of those sort of like, oh, we thought we destroyed the Borg, but maybe there's a chance they're still out there.
Well, that's
Post-credit
what I'm
scene.
saying. Like to
I don't
have
think it will be though. I
because
think it's going to be something else.
it's not going to be the last time that we see the Borg as Star Trek fans. Like, so we don't need. It's almost more annoying for them to be like, there, we defeated this new iteration of the Borg, and then like whatever season, whatever show, the Borg are back somehow. Like, just let them stay where they're. They run away because they failed at whatever they're doing, but they're still powerful and are capable. There's a few comments that we've been missing. Being on TNG, I'd hate it if anyone dies. Okay, speaking of predictions, we were going to talk about that, right? Is somebody going to die? He's going to say it. I don't know what that's in reference to. I wonder if the fleet will be devastated and they'll need to reactivate the D to activate or to active service. That would be cool. That would be cool. I think Beverly has to appeal to Jack.
I
Oh, you're right. The
I
odds are
think
stacked against
Beverly
the
right
Borg.
now is sort of a plot point that she's somehow been a bad mother or failed as a, or just like there's I think for her arc to end up in a better place, she does
Uh,
need to be the voice that actually talks to Jack, not Picard, Beverly, and says
sure.
Jack, and sort of helps Jack make the right decision and get out of the situation.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know though. I think it would still be Picard because he's like got the stronger connection to the Borg, and he doesn't.
He's the main character,
And just and just from what the writers have done so far, because remember, like when they all thought they weren't going to live much longer, and then Picard was like, "I'm going to go spend time with him
not
in the
you.
holodeck," and yeah, and Beverly was like, "Cool, I don't care. Yeah, go spend time with my son
But
that I'm never
I
going to
just
see again."
I feel like I don't know, but they gave Beverly a lot of time. Like we've had some great exploration of Beverly, but I feel like there's still a lot of like to me, I don't understand a lot of the way Beverly is acted that I still want some more development from.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure they will have some of that. I'm sure there will be some kind of redemption arc for like her being like even though I'm saying I think Picard will be the one to talk to Jack, I think Beverly will be involved. RC5150 says that on the episode of the Ready Room, they did show a clip of episode 10, and that it tells you where the Borg are hiding out. So they do, I guess they
They
find out where
clarified
the
that.
Borg are
Okay.
hiding.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Makes
the that yet. I haven't been watching
um,
all the clips. A few times I have.
yeah, yeah. So, well, let's talk about do we think anyone's going to die? Do we think
I don't
anyone's
think
going
so.
to?
I think they all survive. That's why I think.
Okay,
'Cause I feel like I don't. I think that's gonna be difficult to do.
I
I
would
think
agree
Shaw
at this
can
point.
like
Like
maybe other characters. I think the most
Shaw's
likely
already
person to die would be Jack. But I don't think so.
no, I don't think Jack's going to die. I don't. I think if anyone's going to die, it's going to be like one of the older like main characters that they would do like but I also don't think so like I think if part of what they want to do is kind of send off the TNG crew with like a love letter of being like kind of you remember when Indiana Jones was over and then they made more, which actually I still get kind of excited about because I love
Yeah,
the
they're doing
character,
another
but
Indiana Jones.
I know, but they did the movie called The Last Crusade,
Yeah.
and in that movie they rode off into the sunset in the end. Um, and that
Yeah,
stereotypical
that's it. That is
Hollywood.
the Road Off to the Sunset at the end of Undiscovered Country. That's a good way of putting
Yeah, so I think Metalis, like I get the vibe that he really like loves Star Trek and like kind of respects it more than maybe some past showrunners and writers. Um, and if that theory proves
it.
true, then I think he would also want to send the crew off into the sunset and not be like, oh, have like